It all started on Ongle. I'm 18 now, but ever since I was 13, I got hooked on chatting with strangers online. It became a daily ritual. Come home from school, kick back, and dive into the chaotic world of random people. Most were just idiots. Some were decent. And yeah, there were creeps, but nothing ever got as bad as this. To give you some context, my weekdays followed a pretty set routine. Monday through Thursday, it was school, then home, where I'd binge a few episodes of Friends or The Middle to unwind. Fridays were for hanging out with my buddies, usually grabbing food or messing around. Saturdays, though, were my solo days. I'd head to the town center, a bustling spot packed with shops, cinemas, and all sorts of stuff. I liked going alone, though sometimes I'd tag along with friends. One Saturday, I got home after a long day, plopped down at my computer, and cranked up my usual playlist to decompress. The day at school had been rough. Teachers piling on assignments, the usual drama, so I needed to zone out. I watched some YouTube videos, caught a couple friends' episodes, and after scarfing down dinner, I hopped onto Ongle. It was the same old drill, a parade of weirdos and perverts, but then I stumbled across this guy named Chris. He seemed different, like someone I could actually talk to. We messaged back and forth for a solid 40 to 50 minutes. I kept it light, sharing basic stuff about myself, nothing too personal, just things like my hobbies, favorite shows, and how I spend my weekends. He said he was 18, working as an apprentice at some ICT company. What caught my attention was how much we had in common. He was into the same music, liked the same kind of shows, and it gave us plenty to chat about. It felt refreshing, like finding a friend in a sea of strangers. At one point, I mentioned that my web browser was acting up, pages loading slowly, random crashes, that kind of thing. Chris jumped on it, saying, "Hey, I'm great with computers. My job's all about fixing them. You should totally download this app, and I'll check it out for you." He suggested either TeamViewer or Splashtop Streamer. I didn't think twice about it. My computer didn't have anything sensitive on it, just schoolwork, some video games, and a few downloaded movies. Plus, the idea of someone remotely controlling my screen sounded kind of cool, like something out of a sci-fi flick. So I downloaded the app, and he took over, poking around while I watched. I messaged him, "Hey, I'm heading downstairs for a sec. Be back in 5. I grabbed a drink from the kitchen and was back in 3 minutes. Tops. When I sat down, I caught him clearing my web history. It didn't raise any red flags at the time. I figured he was just fixing the browser issue. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "All good now. Problems fixed." Sure enough, my browser was running smoothly again. I thanked him, and we kept chatting for another 20 minutes or so. We agreed to talk again the next evening, using some specific tags so Ongle's system would pair us up. The next night, things took a weird turn. I logged on a bit later than planned, maybe 15 minutes past the time I'd said. 8 p.m. or so, Chris was already there, and he immediately got on my case, asking why I was late. His tone was sharp, almost possessive, like I'd broken some sacred promise. I wasn't having it. "Dude, don't talk to me like that." I shot back. "What's your deal?" He backed off, but his apology creeped me out. "Sorry, honey. I hope you can forgive me. I love you." My stomach dropped. I'm not into guys, and even if I was, this was way too much, way too fast. I told him to cut it out, but he just sent a string of smiley faces, like it was all a joke. Then he dropped a bomb. "I know where you live. I know what school you go to." My heart started racing. Our town's small, sure, but there's no way he could have guessed that kind of info from our chats. I've been careful not to share anything specific. I logged off, shaken, trying to convince myself he was just messing with me. The next few days were quiet, and I almost forgot about the whole thing. I stuck to my routine, school, TV, hanging out with friends. But the following Saturday, things got real. I was at the town center with some friends, grabbing food and chilling on a bench near the food court. Out of nowhere, This guy walked up and asked if he could sit with us. I got a bad vibe, but my friend, always the peacemaker, said, "It's a public bench, we can't stop him." The guy was standing on my friend's side, but when we nodded, he slid right next to me, close enough that I could smell his stale cologne. He didn't say a word, just sat there, staring straight ahead like a statue. My friends kept chatting, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his presence. Then he turned, looked right at me, and smiled, a slow, unsettling grin that made my skin crawl. I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my shoulder, his grip tight. Before I could react, my friend started yelling, and the guy let go, shouting something incoherent right in my ear before storming off. My friends insisted on walking me home that night, and I was grateful for it. Things only got worse from there. A few days later, we started finding blank envelopes slipped through our letterbox. No writing, no stamps, just empty. Then came random bangs on the door at odd hours. We'd rushed to check, but no one was ever there. It was unnerving, like someone was toying with us. After I passed my driving test, a typed letter showed up congratulating me. It wasn't signed, and the formality of it felt wrong, like it wasn't from anyone I knew. The letters kept coming, though less often over time. I told the police everything, about Chris, the creepy guy at the bench, the letters, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They said they were investigating, but it felt like a brush off. To this day, I don't know who was behind it all. Was it Chris? The guy from the bench? Someone else entirely? The not knowing is what keeps me up at night. When I was young, I lived in a small town in Queensland, Australia, a place surrounded by endless bushland stretching hundreds of kilometers in every direction. It was the kind of place where kids had all the space in the world to run wild. And we did. This story is about the first time my friends and I got drunk. A night that was supposed to be a fun adventure, but turned into something none of us will ever forget. It happened during the winter, when a river that ran near our town would dry up enough to expose its sandy bed. Perfect for camping. My best mate's parents owned a local pub, so we were tasked with sneaking some drinks for a camping trip we'd been planning for weeks. We were determined, excited, ready to finally pop our drunk cherry and feel like proper rebels. The spot we picked was out near an old indigenous settlement, a place that felt a bit mysterious, tucked away from the main roads. We trekked down to the riverbank, which was low and sandy on our side, but rose steeply on the opposite bank, lined with thick trees that blocked any view of what might be up there. It was unsettling, knowing someone could be watching from above, hidden in the shadows, and we'd never know. There were 7 of us, all around 12 years old, full of bravado and dumb ideas. Our parents had no clue where we were or what we were up to. We'd lied, say we were crashing at a friend's place for the night. We felt invincible, setting up our camp with a makeshift shelter big enough for all of us to crash under, laughing and joking as we hauled our gear down the sandy slope. We got everything ready just as the sun started to dip, building a fire and cracking open the drinks we'd swiped from the pub, mostly cheap beer and some sugary mixers that tasted like regret. As darkness fell, we were in high spirits, mixing drinks, singing off-key, tossing sticks into the water, and making a racket that echoed through the quiet bush. The stars were out, sharp and bright, and the air was crisp, perfect for a night of messing around. But as we started to wind down, sprawled around the fire, one of my mates, Jake, always a jumpy one, swore he saw something move at the top of the steep riverbank. We all laughed, telling him he was full of crap and needed to chill. But Jake wouldn't let it go, insisting someone was up there, his voice tight with nerves. So, like the brave little idiots we were, we started yelling into the dark, "Come out, you coward!" and other dumb taunts, thinking we were tough. To our shock, a figure stepped out of the tree line. A bearded man, dressed in tattered clothes, barefoot, stood at the edge of the bank, just staring down at us. His hair was wild, like he hadn't seen a comb in years, and his eyes glinted in the firelight. We froze, our voices dying in our throats. For what felt like forever, probably 5 minutes, he didn't move, didn't speak, just watched us. Then, without a word, he slipped back into the trees and vanished. We sat there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. We started whispering among ourselves, nerves creeping in, but the alcohol and our bravado kicked back in, and we brushed it off. Probably just some drifter, we told ourselves, trying to sound tougher than we felt. We stoked the fire higher and kept drinking, determined not to let some weird guy ruin our night. About an hour later, he was back. This time, he wasn't up on the bank. He emerged from the shadows on our side of the river, walking straight into our camp like he belonged there. My heart pounded as he stopped by the fire, standing among us, a group of scrawny 12-year-olds, like he was one of the gang. He was tall, gaunt, with a smell like sweat and dirt clinging to him. We were officially freaked out, too scared to move or say anything. We just sat there, the crackle of fire the only sound, waiting for him to do something, anything. Finally, my mate Tom, braver than the rest of us, found his voice. "Hey, mate, you all right?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The man didn't answer, just turned his head slowly, staring at Tom, then at each of us in turn, his eyes cold and unblinking. Tom tried again, his voice shakier. "What's your name? You okay?" The man snapped his head back to Tom, his eyes wide and wild, and stared for a solid 2 minutes without blinking. Then, in a raspy whisper, he hissed, "That's none of your business." Before we could react, he let out a sound like an angry cat, a sharp, guttural hiss that made us jump. He leapt back, screaming, staring at the fire like it had just appeared out of nowhere, then bolted up the steep bank faster than seemed humanly possible. That bank was a nightmare to climb, loose sand and roots tripping you up, but he scaled it like it was nothing. We stood there, speechless, our buzz completely gone. No one said a word for a long time, the weight of what we'd just seen sinking in. We decided staying wasn't worth it, but it was pitch black, and the walk back to town was 19 kilometers through dense bush. None of us were brave enough for that, so we piled more wood on the fire, determined to keep it roaring all night. We sat close, barely talking, every rustle in the trees making us flinch. One by one, we dozed off, too exhausted to keep watch, though I kept jerking awake at every sound, half expecting that guy to come back. When we woke up at dawn, our camp was trashed. Everything was gone. Our drinks, bags, shoes, blankets, all of it. The creepy part? There wasn't a single footprint in the wet sand where we'd been sleeping. It was like we'd never been there. No trace of anyone coming or going, just our shelter and the smoldering fire. We didn't stick around to figure it out. We bolted, running most of the way back to town, our bare feet cut up and bleeding by the time we got home. We never told our parents what happened. How could we? They'd ground us for life. And besides, who would believe a story that sounded like something out of a horror movie? We swore to keep it between us. And to this day, we've never gone back to that riverbed. One night, I drifted off in an unusual position, flat on my back, which wasn't like me at all. I'm a side sleeper, always have been, but for some reason, that night I ended up staring at the ceiling as sleep took over. The room was warm, the kind of sticky heat that clings to your skin. So I had my small box fan running on the nightstand, its steady hum filling the silence. As I slept, I slipped into a dream that felt too vivid, too real. In it, I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a family dinner, the smell of onions and garlic lingering in the air. My pregnant sister was standing just outside my bedroom door, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. She pushed the door open, and my black cat, Binks, darted out, startling her. She let out a sharp scream, and I couldn't help but laugh from the kitchen. "It's just Binks, relax," I called, wiping my hands on a dish towel as I walked toward the hallway to check on her. But when I reached her, the dream took a strange turn. My sister was frozen, staring into my bedroom, her face pale. The room was unnaturally dark, like a void swallowing the light from the hall. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's something in your room." I frowned, stepping closer, trying to peer into the darkness. My hands were still damp from the towel, and I wiped them on my jeans, feeling a chill despite the warm air. "There's something in your room," she repeated, her eyes locked on the shadows. I followed her gaze, squinting into the pitch-black space, and everything started to feel hazy, like fog rolling in. Her words came again, faster now. "There's something in your room," each repetition more urgent. As I stared, I saw it, a pair of glowing red eyes, piercing the dark at the far end of the room. They weren't animal eyes. They were too deliberate, too aware. My heart raced, and a strange sensation washed over me, like my brain was clawing a memory I'd buried long ago, something I wasn't supposed to know. My sister's voice kept looping. "There's something in your room," faster and faster, until it blurred into a rhythmic swish, matching the sound of my fan's blades. But the fan was spinning way too fast now, way beyond its highest setting, rattling and thumping against a wooden nightstand like it was possessed. I snapped awake, my eyes flying open, and that's when I felt a hand clamped over my mouth, cold and rough, smothering my breath. Something heavy pinned me to the bed, pressing down on my arms and legs, locking me in place. A shrill ringing exploded in my ears, drowning out everything else, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it had burst. I thrashed, trying to twist my head, desperate to break free, but the grip was unrelenting. My lungs burned, each breath a struggle, and panic clawed at my chest. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to wrench my face free and let out a scream that tore through the silence. I tumbled off the bed, hitting the floor hard, my knees scraping the carpet. Scrambling to my feet, I bolted out of the room, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood as I raced through the house. I flipped on every light switch I passed, the harsh glow flooding the hallway, kitchen, living room, anything to banish the dark. My mind was screaming sleep paralysis. It's just sleep paralysis, trying to rationalize the terror, but my body wasn't convinced. I circled back to my room, hesitating at the doorway, then forced myself to flick on the light. The room looked normal. Bed messed up, fan still wobbling from its earlier frenzy, but it felt wrong, like the air was too thick. I cleared my throat, my voice shaky but firm, and said, "If there's any spirits in this room who wish to harm me, you're not welcome here." I repeated it over and over like a mantra, pacing the small space, my hands trembling. Finally, I sank onto bed, clutching the edge of the mattress, too wired to even think about sleeping. The rest of the night, I sat there, wide awake, every creak of the house making me jump. Worse, I could feel something watching me from the window behind me, a prickling on the back of my neck. I didn't dare turn around. I knew if I looked, I'd see whatever had held me down, those red eyes staring back through glass. I stayed frozen until dawn, the first light creeping through the curtains, washing away some of the dread. The next day, I was still shaken, trying to go about my routine like nothing happened. When my neighbor showed up at our door, she looked worried, her usual cheerful demeanor gone. She told my mom she'd been trying to call because one of her security cameras had caught something chilling. A man standing outside my bedroom window at 3 a.m. My blood ran cold. My sister's words from the dream echoed in my head. "There's something in your room," and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd felt, whatever I'd seen, wasn't just in my head. It was real, and it was still out there. Growing up in an outback town in Australia, I took the freedom of wide open spaces for granted. As kids, we roamed the bush without a care, but that same freedom could land you in serious trouble if you weren't careful. This story happened when I was about 11, during the school holidays in my hometown, a dusty speck surrounded by endless scrubland. My Aboriginal mate Danny and I were bored out of our minds, itching for something to do. We decided to go fishing at a secret spot we'd heard about, tucked away near an old Aboriginal encampment about 15 kilometers out of town. It was a place adults rarely mentioned, and when they did, it was with a hushed tone that made it sound forbidden. That only made us more determined to check it out. We started our adventure in town, buzzing with excitement. First, we swung by the butcher's to grab some scraps of meat for yabbies, those little freshwater crawfish we hoped to use as bait. The butcher, a gruff old man with a stained apron, tossed us a bag of offcuts with a wink, probably knowing we were up to no good. Next, we stopped at Danny's place to pick up fishing rods and a couple of traps, the kind made from wire mesh that always smelled faintly of river mud. Then we hit my house, where I stuffed a backpack with snacks, chips, a few apples, and some warm cans of soda, plus a shovel for digging worms. The shovel's handle was splintered, but it'd do the job. With our supplies ready, we set off along the side of the highway, the sun beating down on our backs, our sneakers kicking up red dust as we walked and goofed around, tossing pebbles at road signs and laughing at dumb jokes. After what felt like forever, we reached a sandy track that led off the highway toward the encampment. The air grew quieter as we left the hum of occasional cars behind, replaced by the buzz of cicadas and the rustle of dry grass. We followed the track until we hit a weathered fence marking the boundary of the sacred land. A strange statue stood there, carved from dark wood, its features worn smooth by years of wind and rain. It looked like a figure, maybe human, maybe not, and it gave me the creeps. Danny stopped dead in his tracks, his face serious, and muttered a few words under his breath, his eyes fixed on the statue. He said his dad told him to do it to keep bad spirits away, to make sure they couldn't see us. I rolled my eyes, calling it silly, and skipped the ritual, brushing past the statue with a forced laugh. Danny shot me a look but didn't say anything, and we kept going, trudging another kilometer or so until we reached our fishing spot. The place was perfect. Ghost gums, their white bark peeling like old paint, lined the riverbank, and a gentle breeze carried the earthy scent of the bush. Fish were jumping, their splashes glinting in the sunlight, and we knew we were in for a good day. The river was shallow here, its water clear enough to see the pebbles on the bottom. We dropped our gear and got to work, digging in the damp soil for worms. The shovel bit into the earth, and we pulled up a few fat ones, wriggling the dirt, perfect for bait. We set up our rods, casting lines into the water with high hopes, but after an hour of no bites, we realized we were terrible fishermen. Frustrated, we ditched the rods and waded into the cool water, trying to catch fish with our hands. I was hopeless, slipping on the slimy rocks, but Danny, quick and nimble, nabbed a decent-sized yellowbelly. We hooped in triumph, planning to cook it later and show it off to our mates back in town. We were so caught up in the moment, splashing, laughing, the sun warm on our faces, that we lost track of time. Before we knew it, the sky had turned deep orange and purple and darkness crept in. Danny's mood shifted, his earlier excitement replaced by a nervous edge. "We gotta get out of here," he said, his voice low, eyes darting to the trees. "It's not safe after dark." I laughed, thinking he was being dramatic, but at that exact moment, a loud splash echoed from the water behind us. We both jumped, spinning around, our hearts in our throats. The surface rippled, but there was nothing. No fish, no bird, just stillness. "Probably a big one," I said, trying to sound brave, but my voice cracked. We started packing up, stuffing our gear into bags, the fun of the day draining away. By the time we began our trek back, it was pitch black. We'd forgotten to bring a torch, a rookie mistake, and could barely see our hands in front of our faces. The bush, so alive with noise during the day, was eerily quiet now, the only sound our uneven footsteps crunching on the dirt. We fumbled along, our eyes slowly adjusting to the dark, picking out faint shapes of trees and rocks. About 20 minutes in, we froze. Heavy footsteps thudded to our left, maybe 15 meters away, deliberate and slow. We strained to listen, holding our breath, and the footsteps stopped, like whatever was out there was listening too. The silence was suffocating, no wind, no crickets, nothing. We realized we'd veered off course, missing the sandy track by half a kilometer. Worse, whatever was making those footsteps was between us and the road back to the highway. Panic set in, but we decided to push forward, hoping to loop around and hit the highway further up. It was a bad call. The footsteps started again, sometimes closer, sometimes fading, like something was pacing us. At times, I swore I heard low mumbling, a guttural sound that didn't seem human. I whispered to Danny, my voice shaking, but he hissed, "Shut up, don't look back. It can't see us." His words didn't make sense, but the fear in his voice kept me moving. My stomach twisted, every step heavier than the last. Then, a loud crash exploded from our left, branches snapping like something big had stumbled. Danny grabbed my arm, yanking me into the scrub, and we hit the ground, lying flat among the prickly bushes. My heart hammered, so loud I was sure it'd give us away. Peeking through the leaves, I saw a silhouette loom onto the faint path we'd been on. It was tall, unnaturally thin, with what looked like feathers or rags hanging from its frame. It moved jerkily, darting from tree to tree, its head snapping side to side, searching. A low, rumbling mumble came from it, chilling my blood. It was hunting us. It lingered where we'd been standing, then froze, stooping low, staring down the path. A second later, a kangaroo bounded off into the bush, its thumps fading. The thing let out an unearthly scream, a sound that tore through my skull and shot off down the path, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. I turned to Danny, whispering, "Did you see that?" But he was curled up, head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "We're not allowed to look," he choked out, his voice barely audible. "I told you to see you." We stayed there, huddled in the scrub, for what felt like 2 hours, too terrified to move. The bush was silent again, but the air felt heavy, like it was watching us. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. We scrambled out, abandoning half our stuff, including Danny's prize yellow belly, and ran, our legs burning, all the way back to town. We stumbled into the dim streetlights, gasping, our clothes torn and faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Every time I tried to bring it up with Danny later, he'd snap, "Shut your mouth, or it'll come back." Eventually, I stopped asking. That night changed me. I haven't slept right since, always waking to the faintest sounds, half expecting to hear that scream again. The bush, once my playground, now feels like it's hiding something I was never meant to see. I used to go pig hunting with one of my best mates, Luke, all the time. It was our thing, loading up the Uda, grabbing the dogs, and heading out into the bush under the stars, chasing the thrill of the hunt. But there's one night I'll never forget, a night that turned our usual adventure into something straight out of a nightmare. We were out in the middle of nowhere, about 400 kilometers from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but scrub and silence. The air was cool, carrying the sharp scent of eucalyptus, and the moon was just a sliver, leaving the world dim and shadowy. We'd been tracking for a while, driving along a dirt track beside a towering dam bank, its steep slope looming like a dark wall to our left. The dogs, a pair of tough kelpies named Rusty and Blue, were in the back of the Uda, their bells jingling faintly as they shifted, eager for action. Suddenly, they lost it, barking and whining, their paws scrabbling against the tray. We knew that sound. They'd caught a scent. Luke slammed on the brakes, the tires crunching on gravel, and we hopped out, hearts pumping. "Reckon we're onto some pigs," Luke said, his grin wide in the glow of the headlights. We let the dogs loose, and they shot off into the dark, their bells ringing wildly as they tore through the underbrush, chasing whatever they'd smelled. We stood by the Uda, rifles in hand, listening as the bells grew fainter, swallowed by the vastness of the bush. The night was alive with small sounds, crickets, the rustle of leaves, but the dogs' excitement had us buzzing. Then, abruptly, the bells stopped. The bush went dead quiet, like someone had flipped a switch. No crickets, no wind, just an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. Luke and I exchanged a look, the hairs on my neck standing up. "That ain't right," I muttered, gripping my rifle tighter. We felt okay, sort of, with the weight of the loaded guns in our hands, but the sudden stillness was unnerving, like the world was holding its breath. We stood there, straining to hear anything, for what felt like forever, probably 10 or 15 minutes. The silence was suffocating, heavy in a way I'd never felt before. Luke finally broke it, calling out for the dogs, his voice sharp against the quiet. "Rusty, Blue, come on, boys." He kept at it, shouting their names, whistling, but there was nothing. No barks, no bells, no rustling of paws through the scrub. My stomach twisted. Those dogs were like family. They never ignored a call. Luke's face tightened, his jaw set. "We're going to find him," he said, turning toward the Uda to grab a torch. I nodded, though the unease was crawling up my spine, making my hands clammy. Just as he reached for the door, a faint jingle cut through the silence. Bells, coming from behind us in the tree line. We froze, turning slowly, the beam of Luke's torch slicing through the dark. The sound was wrong, though. The dogs had bolted in the opposite direction, toward the dam bank. So why were the bells coming from the trees? Luke called out again, softer this time. "Rusty? Blue." The jingling stopped, and for a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then out of the shadows, the dogs came trotting back, their tails low, eyes wide and skittish. My relief turned to ice when I saw them. No bells. The collars around their necks were bare, the metal rings that held the bells gone, like they'd been torn off. Luke and I stared at each other, our breaths shallow. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. We didn't think twice. We grabbed the dogs, their fur damp and trembling under our hands, and threw them into the back of the Uda. I scrambled into the passenger seat, slamming the door as Luke gunned the engine. The tires spun, kicking up dirt, and we peeled out, heading to the other side of the property, as far from that tree line as we could get. The whole time, those damn bells kept jingling in my head, like something out there was still holding them, taunting us. We were rattled, no question. Out here, for 100 kilometers from civilization, there was no one else. No campers, no farmers, nobody. So what had taken the bells? And why were the dogs so spooked? We didn't talk much for the rest of the night, just sat in the Uda with the windows cracked, rifles across our laps, jumping at every snap of a twig. The dogs stayed quiet, curled up tight in the back, not even whining. Every so often, I catch Luke staring into the dark, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We stayed out there till dawn, too wired to sleep, too scared to move. When the first light finally broke over the horizon, painting the bush in soft grays, we drove back to town, the weight of that night heavy between us. We never found the bells, never figured out what happened. I'm still curious if anyone else has been through something like that out in the bush, a night where the world turns strange and leaves you questioning what's really out there. I've been working as a doorman in Scotland for about 5.5 years now. The pay isn't great, but it's what I do to scrape by, especially with child maintenance to cover. Jobs aren't exactly plentiful where I live, so I make do. There was a time when I loved the gig, chatting with regulars, feeling like part of the nightlife. But that changed about 2 years ago, after an incident that turned my world upside down. Let me take you back to a few weeks before it all went to hell to set the scene. It was January, freezing cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes your breath puff out in clouds. Snow was still falling, blanketing the streets in a soft white hush, but it didn't make the 12-hour shifts outside any easier. My hands were numb, my joints stiff, and I spent most of my time checking IDs and dealing with drunk punters who got mouthy when I turned them away. During this time, I started noticing a guy who came to the pub every weekend. I'd seen him around for ages, always nodding or tossing a quick "all right, mate" as he passed, but we'd never properly talked. He seemed like a decent sort, always dressed sharp, with an easy smile that made him stand out among the usual crowd of rowdy lads and stag parties. One bitter night, I was posted at the front door, shivering in my coat, when he came out for a smoke. He offered me one, and we got to chatting. His name was Robbie, and he was a proper laugh, full of stories about his job at a local garage and the daft things his mates got up to. We hit it off, swapping banter over cigarettes for the next couple of weeks, the kind of easy camaraderie that makes long shifts bearable. Around the same time, I'd started catching the eye of a lass who worked behind a bar, Amy, my now girlfriend. She'd glance over with a shy smile, and I'd catch myself grinning back, knowing there was something there. Soon, she started coming out to chat during her breaks, and it wasn't long before we were seeing each other proper. I was chuffed, happier than I'd been in ages, with new mate and Robbie and Amy by my side. But after Amy and I got together, Robbie seemed to vanish. For 3 weeks, I didn't see him at the pub, which was odd for a regular like him. I asked the manager and bar staff if they'd spotted him, but no one had. I figured he'd moved on to another spot or was just lying low. Then came the night everything changed. It was around midnight. The snow had finally stopped, and I was at my post, the cold biting at my fingertips. I heard the pub door creak open behind me, like someone was leaving, and turned to say, "Cheers, folks. Safe home." But there he was, Robbie, standing in the doorway with a weird, lopsided smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mate, where have you been hiding?" I asked, trying to keep it light. His reply was blunt, almost cold, like he was annoyed I'd even asked. It sat wrong, but I let it slide. He lit a cigarette, smoked it in silence, and went back inside without another word. Amy was in the pub that night, so I brushed it off, figuring he was just in a mood. By 1 a.m., it was closing time. I did my usual routine, calling out, "Right, everyone, finish your drinks and head to the exit, please." Once the last straggler stumbled out, I locked up, said goodnight to manager and bar staff, and popped in my headphones some old rock tunes blasting to keep me warm on the walk home. The quickest route was along the side of a Tesco store, a dimly lit stretch with flickering streetlights and long shadows. I was singing to myself, not really paying attention, when I bumped into someone hard. I yanked out my earbuds, ready to apologize, and saw Robbie standing there, his face unreadable in the faint glow. "Sorry, mate," I said, forcing a smile. "See you next weekend." I turned to walk away, slipping my headphones back in, and made it about 30 yards when a searing pain exploded in my neck, then my side, then my leg. I collapsed, the pavement cold and wet against my cheek, blood pooling under me, warm and sticky. I rolled over, gasping, and there he was, Robbie, looming above me, a steak knife in his hand, that same eerie smile on his face. He didn't say a word, just walked off into the dark as I fumbled for my phone. My hands were slick with blood, making the screen smear, and I couldn't unlock it with my fingerprint or type the passcode. In a panic, I used my nose to tap out 999, pressing my other hand against my neck to slow the bleeding. The ambulance arrived fast, sirens cutting through the night, and they whisked me to the hospital. My vision kept blurring, my breath shallow, and my leg twitched uncontrollably. The doctors worked on me, but I don't remember much. I was out cold. When I woke the next day, my head was pounding, and Amy was at my bedside, her eyes red from crying. She grabbed my hand, tears spilling over, and soon my parents and sisters arrived, their faces a mix of relief and worry. I stayed in the hospital for 4 or 5 days, but by the 4th, I was itching to get out. Against the doctor's advice, I signed myself out and headed home. I'll never forget standing at my garden gate, my hand trembling on the latch, glancing up the street toward the Tesco where it happened. The memory of Robbie's smile flashed in my mind, and I shoved it down, stepping inside. I collapsed on the couch with painkillers and the cuppa, the warmth of the tea doing little to ease the ache in my body or my mind. The days dragged on, and I started to feel a bit better physically, though the mental scars were raw. Amy begged me not to go back to work, worried sick about me, but money was tight, and I didn't have a choice. We had a massive row about it, her voice cracking as she pleaded, but I promised to take the long way around, avoiding the Tesco shortcut. For 2 weeks, I worked my shifts without a sign of Robbie. I kept my head down, checking IDs, breaking up the odd scuffle, but the pub felt different now, like the warmth had been sucked out of it. Then one night, Amy came home shaken, saying she felt like someone was watching the house. Strange things have been happening. A shadow passing the window, odd noises at night. I told her she was being paranoid, that we were just on edge after everything, but I wasn't so sure myself. The next night, we were lying in bed after making love, her head resting on my chest, her breathing soft as she drifted off. I was just about to doze off when the bedroom window shattered. Glass sprang across the room. Amy screamed, and I bolted upright, heart racing. I threw on my slippers, grabbed my phone, and ran downstairs to check the front garden, my pulse hammering in my ears. As I reached the front door, another crash came from the kitchen. The window there had been smashed too. I sprinted to the back door, flung it open, and swept the garden with my phone's torch, the beam shaking in my hand. Nothing. No one. I locked the doors and rushed back to Amy, who was huddled on the bed, sobbing, glass glinting on the floor around her. The next day, I popped out to shop for bread and milk, while Amy waited for repair guys to fix the windows. When I got back, she handed me a letter, her hands trembling. I tore it open and read the words scrawled inside. "How dare you leave me in my time of need?" My blood ran cold. Amy took one look at it and broke down, packing a bag and heading to her mom's, saying she couldn't stay in the house anymore. I didn't blame her, but it hurt like hell to see her go. That night, I was alone, lying in bed, the new windows making the room feel too quiet, too exposed. Just as I started to drift off, a creepy whistling tune drifted in from outside, high-pitched and slow, like something from a horror flick. I sat up, heart pounding, and crept to the window, peering through the blinds. A figure was walking past, hood up, hands in pockets. He stopped right in line with the window, still whistling, and then his head snapped up, eyes locking onto mine. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug, my breath caught in my throat. Then came bangs on the front door, loud and deliberate, followed by that same chilling whistle. I heard the door handle rattle, like someone was testing it. Before everything went silent, I waited frozen for 5 agonizing minutes before checking the house, torch in hand, sweeping the front and back gardens. Nothing, no one, but I didn't sleep a wink for the next couple of nights. Things were calm. I went back to work, trying to act normal, though every shadow made me jump. Halfway through a shift, I told the manager about the attack, since she hadn't been around when I returned. She listened, her face grim, as we stood by the bar, the hum of the pub around us. Later that night, I spotted a guy watching football, his back to me, wearing a snot green jacket and brown corduroy trousers. My gut twisted. I leaned toward the manager, whispering, "I think that's him." She nodded, her voice low, and told me he had a split personality, that he'd hurt people before, but got off because it wasn't him when he did it. My head spun. How was that even possible? As the football match at halftime, he turned and walked over, all smiles, like we were old pals. "Hey, mate, long time no see." "How you been?" he said, his voice bright. I stared at him, the image of that steak knife flashing in my mind, blood pooling on the pavement. I don't know why, but I played along, my voice tight. "Yeah, fine, mate. You?" He grinned, oblivious. "I'm good. Can I buy you a pint?" It was surreal. This guy who tried to kill me now wanted to share a drink. I shook my head, saying, "Can't, I'm working." He shrugged and headed to the toilet. I turned to the manager, asking if she thought it was an act or if he really didn't remember. She was mid-sentence when the toilet door swung open and he stormed out, his face twisted, eyes wild. He raised his arm, the same knife glinting in his hand, and charged at me. This time I was ready. As he swung, I grabbed his arm, twisting hard until I heard a sickening crack. He screamed, the knife clattered into the floor, and I pinned him down, my knee on his back, shouting for someone to call the police. They arrived quickly, cuffing him and dragging him away. I haven't seen or heard from him since, though I heard he was locked up in a mental hospital. That was over 2 years ago. Amy and I patched things up, moved to a new house, and welcomed a beautiful baby girl. We're expecting our second any day now. But that night and everything that followed changed me. I used to think I could read people, that I could spot the good ones from the bad. Robbie seemed like the nicest guy alive, but he tried to end my life, then offer me a pint like it never happened, only to come at me again. The lesson I learned? Don't judge a book by its cover. Trust is a lot harder for me now, and I'm careful about who I let into my world. A few years back, my brother-in-law, Tom, bought another apartment complex in Florida. He's got a knack for real estate, owning several properties in places like West Palm Beach and Miami. So when he told me about this new one and asked me to manage it, I figured it was a solid opportunity. I just graduated college with a degree in business and was planning to start grad school, so I thought I could handle the complex while studying. The idea of moving to Florida was exciting. Sun, beaches, maybe even a yearly pass to Disney World, which I've been dreaming about since I was a kid. When Tom booked my flight to Orlando, I was pumped, already imagining weekend trips to the parks, soaking up the nightlife, and living the good life. But when we arrived, my excitement took a hit. Tom drove us out to Leesburg, a town about an hour from Orlando. It wasn't the vibrant, club-filled city I'd pictured. Leesburg was like a weird mix of a biker hangout and a retirement village, with dive bars and golf courses outnumbering anything remotely exciting. I felt a sinking disappointment, realizing I was stuck in this quiet town, far from the bright lights of Orlando. Still, I shook it off and got to work, settling into my role as the manager of a small apartment complex. My place was a cozy one-bedroom unit in the corner of the property, and I had 10 tenants to look after. Most were older folks, snowbirds and retirees who spent their days golfing, swimming in the complex's small pool, or sipping iced tea on their patios. There were also 2 military families, one with young kids who'd chase each other around the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the complex. And then there was Andy. Andy was hard to miss. He was massive, at least 6 feet 6 inches and well over 400 pounds, with long black hair tied back in a ponytail and a slow, deliberate walk aided by a cane. I'm a big guy myself, 6 feet 4 inches, 250 pounds, but Andy made me feel small. He said he worked from home, though rumors among the tenants whispered he was on disability after a bad accident at a construction job. I didn't pry. He paid his rent on time, kept himself, and never caused trouble, which was all I cared about. I only visited his apartment once, when his air conditioning broke down during a brutal summer day. I'd expect a mess, pizza boxes, beer cans, the usual bachelor pad chaos, but his place was surprisingly tidy. The furniture was simple, the counters clean, and the only personal touch was a stack of tech magazines on the coffee table. It threw me off, but I figured he was just a private guy who liked things orderly. For the first year, life at the complex was smooth. I handled maintenance calls, collected rent, and kept the pool sparkling, all while juggling online grad school courses. The tenants were easy to manage, and I got along with everyone, even throwing a barbecue for the military families one weekend. But one rainy November night, everything changed. It was around midnight, the kind of Florida downpour that turns the streets into rivers, when someone rang my doorbell. I peered through the peephole and saw Joseph, one of the retirees who lived next to Andy. Joe was usually all smiles, cracking jokes about his golf swing or the best beer brands. But tonight his face was pale, his eyes wide with worry. "Sam, I hate to bother you," he said, his voice shaky, "but something's not right with Andy." I grabbed my jacket, the rain drumming against the windows, and followed Joe to his apartment. The complex was dark, the outdoor lights flickering under the storm's assault. When we reached Andy's door, Joe put a finger to his lips and motioned for me to listen. I pressed my ear against the wood and heard it. Andy's voice, low and angry, arguing with someone. It wasn't a one-sided rant. It sounded like a full-blown fight with thuds and crashes, like furniture being shoved or objects hitting the floor. I froze, confused. In the year Andy had lived here, he'd never had a single visitor. Not a friend, not a delivery guy, nobody. Who the hell was he fighting with? I knocked firmly, the sound sharp against the rain's patter, and heard heavy footsteps stomping toward the door. Andy flung it open, his massive frame filling the doorway, and I nearly stepped back. He looked like a different person. His usually neat clothes were replaced by a stained t-shirt, his hair hung limp and greasy, and a sour stench of body odor hit me like a wave. Behind him, the apartment was a wreck. Papers scattered, a lamp tipped over, cushions on the floor. "Everything okay, Andy?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was racing. He glared at me, his eyes bloodshot, and snapped, "Yeah, it's fine." Before I could say anything else, he slammed the door in my face. I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, trying to process what I'd seen. I sent Joe back to his place, telling him to let me know if he heard anything else, and trudged back to my apartment, the unease settling deep in my gut. I barely slept that night, the sound of those crashes replaying in my head. The next morning, I decided to check on Andy, hoping he'd cooled off. I knocked on his door, the sun barely cutting through the gray clouds, but there was no answer. I figured he was sleeping or didn't want to talk, so I let it go, getting caught up in other tasks, fixing a leaky faucet, emailing Tom about budget stuff. I forgot about it until December rolled around, and I started collecting rent checks. Everyone paid on time, except Andy. That was unlike him. His checks were usually in my mailbox on the first, no questions asked. Worried, I went back to his apartment and knocked again, louder this time. Nothing. I knocked harder, and then I heard a low, pained grunt, followed by a moan that made my skin crawl. I should have called the police right then, but I didn't think. I fumbled for my master key, my hand shaking, and unlocked the door. The smell hit me first, a gut-wrenching mix of urine, vomit, and sweat that made my eyes water. The apartment was unrecognizable. Walls streaked with what looked like feces, furniture overturned, trash strewn across the floor. I gagged, covered my nose with my sleeve, and called out, "Andy, you in here?" My voice echoed, answered only by another weak moan from the back bedroom. I dialed 911 as I moved forward, my boots sticking to the filthy carpet, my heart pounding. When I pushed open the bedroom door, I froze, bile rising my throat. Andy was sprawled naked on the floor, lying on a pile of soiled clothes, his body covered in his own waste and vomit. But that wasn't the worst of it. His arms and legs were riddled with human bite marks, red and swollen, some oozing with infection. Blood pooled around his lower body, and I realized with horror it was coming from his rectum. I couldn't process it. Had someone attacked him? Was it the person Joe heard him fighting with? The paramedics arrived quickly, their radios crackling as they rushed Andy to the hospital. He was in the ICU, fighting for his life, and I was left reeling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. A few days later, the truth came out, piece by horrifying piece, through conversations with the doctors and Andy's sister, who was his medical guardian. There was no other person that night. Andy had been arguing with himself, his mind unraveling after he stopped taking his meds for multiple mental disorders. The bites? He'd done them to himself, gnawing his own flesh in a psychotic episode. The bleeding? He'd caused it by inserting an object, doing catastrophic damage to his insides. I felt sick, my mind struggling to comprehend how someone could spiral so far. Andy pulled through, barely, and went to live with his sister. I was left with the grim task of cleaning his apartment, a job that haunts me as much as finding him. While scrubbing the floors and hauling out ruined furniture, I found a shoebox tucked under his bed. Inside were magazine clippings, old family photos, and pictures he'd clearly taken of the complex's residents, including me. Every face had its eyes burned out with cigarette marks, some with X's scratched over the mouths. My stomach churned as I stared at them, wondering if this was part of his breakdown or if he'd always been this disturbed, hiding it behind his quiet demeanor. I burned the box in the dumpster behind the complex, never telling anyone. But those images are seared into my memory. I don't know if Andy was dangerous before his collapse, but knowing he'd been watching us, collecting us, makes me question everything I thought I knew about the people I live among. I'm a hairdresser and I love my job, transforming people's looks, chatting with clients, making them feel like $1,000,000. My days are usually filled with the hum of blow dryers, the snip of scissors, and the chatter of the salon, a cozy spot in a small town where everyone knows each other. But a few years ago, my life took a dark turn because of a guy named Matt. I met him during a rare night out with my girlfriends, a break from my usual routine of work, and crashing early with a glass of wine and Netflix. That night, we ended up at a local bar, all neon lights and sticky floors, laughing over cocktails. Matt caught my eye from across the room, tall, with messy brown hair and a charming grin that made my stomach flutter. He came over, bought us a round, and we hit it off instantly. He was funny, attentive, and had this easy confidence that drew me in. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and I went home buzzing, thinking maybe this was the start of something good. The next morning, Matt texted me, and we started talking nonstop. He'd send sweet messages, asking about my day, throwing in little compliments that made me smile while I was trimming bangs or sweeping up hair. I'd always been cautious about dating, but Matt seemed different, genuine, interested in me, not just the surface stuff. After a couple weeks, we went on our first date, a dinner at a little Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles flickering in wine bottles. He was even better in person, telling stories about his job as a mechanic, his love for old cars, and his dog, a scruffy mutt named Buddy. I opened up too, sharing my dreams of owning my own salon one day, my obsession with true crime podcasts, and how much I adore my cat Luna. We laughed until our sides hurt, and when he walked in my car, he kissed me softly under the streetlights. I drove home with butterflies, feeling like I was falling hard. For the first few months, everything was perfect. Matt was the ideal boyfriend, thoughtful, supportive, always planning cute dates like picnics by the lake or movie nights with takeout. He'd show up at the salon with coffee just because, and my co-workers teased me about how smitten I was. Even my cat, who usually hissed at strangers, would curl up next to him on the couch. But slowly, things started to change. It was subtle at first, like a shadow creeping in. Matt began commenting on my clothes, saying stuff like, "That skirt's a bit short for work, don't you think?" Or, "You don't need all that makeup, babe." I brushed it off, thinking he was just being protective. Then he started getting annoyed when I went out with friends, texting me constantly, asking where I was, who I was with. If I didn't reply right away, he'd call, his voice sharp, accusing me of ignoring him. I'd laugh it off, try and keep the peace, but it started to wear me down. One night, I was out with my best friend, Sarah, at a wine bar, catching up after a long week. My phone kept buzzing with Matt's texts, each one more demanding. "Why aren't you answering? Who's there? You better not be flirting with some guy." I sighed, showing Sarah the screen, and she frowned, saying, "That's not okay, Jess. He's acting possessive." I defended him, saying he was just stressed from work. But deep down, I knew she was right. When I got home, Matt was waiting outside my apartment, leaning against his car, his arms crossed. The air felt heavy, charged with something dark. "Where the hell were you?" he snapped, his eyes narrow. I tried to explain, but he cut me off, yelling about how I was disrespecting him. My neighbor's lights flicked on, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I apologized, hating myself for it, and he finally calmed down, pulling me into a hug that felt more like acclaim than comfort. After that, things got worse. Matt's jealousy turned into control. He'd show up at the salon unannounced, watching me work, his presence making my clients uneasy. He insisted on driving me everywhere, saying it wasn't safe for me to be alone, even in our quiet town. He hated Luna, calling her a damn nuisance, and shoving her off the couch when she got too close. I started walking on eggshells, avoiding anything that might set him off. My friends noticed I was pulling away, but I was too ashamed to tell them how bad it had gotten. I kept hoping the old Matt, the sweet, funny guy from those first dates, would come back. One night, we were at his place, a cramped apartment filled with car parts and empty beer cans. We'd been arguing about me going to a co-worker's birthday party, and he was pacing, his voice low and menacing. I tried to leave, grabbing my purse, but he blocked the door, his face inches from mine. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. My heart pounded, fear curling in my chest, but I stood my ground, saying, "Matt, move." He laughed, a cold, bitter sound, and that's when he told me about his ex-girlfriend's cat. "You know what I did to her stupid pet," he said, his eyes gleaming with something cruel. "I killed it, snapped its neck because she wouldn't shut up about it." I froze, my mind racing to Luna, safe at home. Then he kept going, admitting he'd hit his ex, put her in a hospital, and laughed about how she deserved it. I felt sick, realizing I was standing in front of a monster. I don't know where I found the strength, but I pushed past him, my hands shaking as I grabbed the door handle. He lunged, his fingers digging into my arm, and I screamed, "Let go!" My voice was louder than I expected, and it startled him just enough for me to wrench free and run to my car. I locked the doors, my breath ragged, and sped away, his shouts fading behind me. I didn't go home, terrified he'd follow me. Instead, I drove to Sarah's, sobbing as I told her everything. She held me, promising I'd never have to see him again, and let me crash on her couch. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I'd never done, and went to police. They took my statement, their faces grim as I recounted Matt's threats and his confession about his ex. They issued a restraining order and said they'd look into his past, but warned me it might be hard to prove without evidence. For the next few weeks, I stayed with Sarah, too scared to go back to my apartment. I kept picturing Matt breaking in, hurting Luna, who I'd brought to Sarah's with me. The salon felt like the only safe place where I could lose myself and work, but even there, I'd jump at every loud noise. Then one day, a detective called with news that hit me like a freight train. Matt was gone. He'd taken his own life in his apartment, leaving a note that didn't mention me or his ex, just rambled about guilt and voices in his head. The detective said they'd found evidence tying him to his ex's assault, and he'd been set to face charges before his court date. I didn't know how to feel. Relief, grief, anger, all tangled together. I cried for the man I thought he was, the one I'd fallen for, but I hated the monster he became. It took a long time to feel safe again. I moved to a new apartment, got a security system, and started therapy to unpack the trauma. Luna stayed by my side, her purring a quiet comfort on the nights I woke up shaking. My friends rallied around me, and slowly, I rebuilt my life, opened my own salon last year, a dream I never thought I'd reach after Matt. I'm stronger now, but I'll never forget how love can blind you to the truth, or how quickly someone can change. I keep a photo of Luna on my desk at the salon, a reminder that I got out, that I survived. Growing up in Alaska, I was used to the kind of isolation that comes with long winters and small towns. My family lived in a quiet community, the kind where everyone knows your name and your business, but secrets still manage to hide in plain sight. I was 16 when this happened, a junior in high school, spending most of my time with my two best friends, Emily and Tara, who lived within walking distance. We were inseparable, always hanging out at my place. A small two-story house with a creaky porch and a basement that smelled faintly of mildew. My parents were away a lot for work. Dad was a mechanic for an oil company and Mom was a nurse, so I had to run the house most weekends. That freedom felt like a gift until it became a nightmare. It started in the fall, when the days were getting shorter and the air carried a crisp bite that promised snow. Emily, Tara, and I had a tradition of sleepovers at my house, sprawling out in the living room with blankets, popcorn, and scary movies. We'd laugh through the jump scares, daring each other to stay up until dawn. One night, we were deep into a horror flick, the glow of the TV casting shadows across the room, when we heard a faint scratching sound. It was subtle, like nails on wood, coming from somewhere below us. We paused the movie, the silence in the house suddenly heavy, and listened. There was again, scratch, 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 definitely from the basement. Tara, always the bold one, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and said, "Let's check it out. Probably just a rat or something." I wasn't so sure, but I didn't want to look like a coward. So I followed, Emily trailing behind, clutching a throw pillow like it was a shield. The basement door was in the hallway, its paint chipped and handle cold to the touch. I flicked on the light, but the single bulb barely reached the corners of the room, leaving pools of shadow. The scratching had stopped, but the air felt wrong, thick with musty smell that seemed stronger than usual. We crept down the wooden stairs, each step creaking under our weight, the flashlight beam darting across shelves of canned goods and old boxes. At the far end was the crawl space, a low, dark area under the house accessible through a small wooden hatch. Tara aimed the flashlight at it, and we noticed the hatch was slightly ajar, a thin gap revealing nothing but blackness. My stomach twisted. "That's not supposed to be open," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Emily whimpered, "Can we go back upstairs now?" But Tara, stubborn as ever, insisted we check it out, saying, "If it's an animal, we need to know so we can tell your dad." We inched closer, the floorboards cold against our bare feet, and Tara nudged the hatch open with the flashlight. The beam caught a glimpse of something, maybe dirt, maybe insulation, but nothing moved. The scratching didn't return, and after a tense minute, we convinced ourselves it was nothing. We shoved the hatch closed, wedged a heavy box against it for good measure, and hurried back upstairs, locking the basement door behind us. We didn't finish the movie that night, opting instead to huddle under blankets, giggling nervously to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just our imaginations, fueled by too many horror movies, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the next few weeks, strange things kept happening. I'd hear faint noises at night, thumps or scrapes from the basement, always when I was alone. Sometimes, I'd find the basement door cracked open, even though I was sure I'd locked it. I started checking it obsessively, jiggling the handle before bed, but it didn't stop the sounds. Then there were the little things that went missing. A hairbrush, a pair of socks, one of Tara's earrings after a sleepover. We joked about a house ghost, but the humor felt forced, especially when I noticed smudges on walls, like dirty fingerprints, too high for me to have made. I told my parents when they called, but they brushed it off, saying old houses make noises, and I was letting my imagination run wild. I wanted to believe them, but the unease grew, a constant knot in my chest. One morning, I woke up to find my bedroom window slightly open, the curtain fluttering in the icy breeze. I never left it open. Alaska winters are brutal, and I like my room cozy. I slammed it shut, my heart racing, and checked the house, but nothing else seemed out of place. That day at school, I told Emily and Tara, and they insisted on coming over after class to help me investigate. We searched the basement again, braver in the daylight, but found nothing except the same musty smell and a few cobwebs. The crawlspace hatch was still closed, the box undisturbed, so we chalked it up to a faulty window latch and tried to move on. But that night, alone in my room, I couldn't sleep, the memory of that open window gnawing at me. I kept my lamp on, the soft glow of small comfort, and clutched my phone, ready to call 911 if I heard anything. A few days later, everything fell apart. It was a Saturday, and I'd spent the day with Emily and Tara at the local diner, sipping hot chocolate and gossiping about school. We got back to my place around dusk, planning to bake cookies and binge a new show. As we walked up the porch steps, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. My blood ran cold. I knew I'd locked it before leaving. "Guys, stay back," I said, my voice trembling. Tara pushed past me, saying, "It's probably just the wind. Let's check." We stepped inside, the house eerily quiet, and that's when we smelled it. Smoke, faint but unmistakable. It was coming from the basement. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the kitchen, my hands shaking, and we opened the basement door. A thin haze hung in the air, and the smell of burning wood was stronger now. We rushed downstairs, the stairs groaning under our weight, and saw it. Flames licking up from the crawl space, the hatch wide open, smoke billowing out. I sprayed the extinguisher, the foam hissing as it smothered the fire, while Tara called 911. Emily was crying, clutching my arm, as we backed away, coughing from the smoke. The fire was small but growing fast, and I realized with horror that someone had set it. The firefighters arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the quiet evening, followed by police cars. They put out the fire before it could spread, but the basement was a mess. Charred wood, soaked insulation, and that same sickening smell now mixed with chemicals. As the firefighters worked, a police officer pulled me aside, his face grim. "We found something in the crawl space," he said, his voice low. "You need to stay calm, but we think someone's been living down there." My knees buckled, and Emily grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. The officer led us inside the house, where another cop was escorting a man in handcuffs to a patrol car. He was thin, with matted hair and wild eyes, his clothes filthy and torn. I didn't recognize him, but the sight of him made my stomach churn. The officer explained they found a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and a small pile of stolen items in the crawl space, including my hairbrush, Tara's earring, and a photo of the three of us from my bulletin board. The man, Mark, had been living under our house for 4 months, sneaking in and out through a loose vent, watching us through peepholes he drilled in the walls. The police searched the crawl space further and found evidence he'd been starting small fires, likely to keep warm, but this one had gotten out of hand. Mark had a history of vagrancy and mental health issues, and he'd targeted our house because it was quiet and my parents were often away. He'd been stealing small things, taking photos, even standing outside my window at night. The smudges, the noises, the open window, it was all him. I felt violated, like my home, my safe space, had been tainted. The police took him away, and my parents came home the next day, horrified, promising to install better locks and a security system. We stayed with Emily's family for a few weeks while the house was repaired, but I couldn't shake the fear that Mark was still out there, watching. Tara and Emily were shaken too. Our sleepovers replaced by group therapy sessions to process the trauma. I'd lie awake at night, hearing every creak, imagining him crawling back through the vent. Even now, years later, I check my locks obsessively and keep a flashlight by my bed, just in case. That winter taught me that safety is an illusion, and the scariest monsters aren't in movies. They're real, and sometimes they're closer than you think. This all started 3 years ago, during my senior year of high school, in a small town in Colorado. My friends and I were always looking for ways to spice up our weekends, and one night, we decided to mess around with a Ouija board. It was the kind of thing we'd joke about, half believing it was nonsense, half curious about what might happen. My buddy Jake had found the board at a thrift store, its box faded and corners dented, but the planchette and letters were intact, giving it an eerie charm. We gathered at my house, a split-level home on the edge of town, with a big basement rec room perfect for our late-night hangouts. The air was chilly, fall settling in, and we dragged blankets and snacks downstairs, setting up a cozy circle on the shag carpet under the glow of a single lamp. There were 5 of us, Me, Jake, Sarah, Liam, and Mia. Jake was the instigator, always pushing us to try something wild, his grin infectious. Sarah was skeptical, rolling her eyes but secretly intrigued, her dark hair tucked behind her ears as she sipped the soda. Liam was quiet, the thoughtful one, always analyzing everything, while Mia was our resident ghost story enthusiast, her eyes lighting up at the mention of anything spooky. We lit a few candles for atmosphere, their flames flickering against the wood panel walls, and placed a Ouija board in the center of our circle. The basement smelled faintly of old books and popcorn, and the hum of the furnace in the corner was the only sound as we settled in, knees touching, hands hovering over the planchette. Jake took charge, explaining the rules like he was some kind of expert. Everyone put 2 fingers on it lightly and don't push. Ask clear questions and don't freak out if it moves. We all nodded, a mix of giggles and nervous glances. Sarah asked the first question, her voice half mocking. "Is there anyone here with us?" For a moment, nothing happened, and we started to laugh, the tension easing. Then the planchette twitched, sliding slowly to yes. My stomach flipped, but I figured someone was messing around. "Who's doing that?" I asked, eyeing Jake, who swore he wasn't moving it. We asked again, "Who are you?" The planchette spelled out Zio, slow and deliberate, the wood creaking under our fingers. Mia gasped, whispering, "That's bad. Zozo's a demon or something." Sarah scoffed, but her hands were trembling. We kept going, caught between fear and fascination. "What do you want?" Liam asked, his voice steady. The planchette jerked to WATCH, then stopped. The candles flickered, though there was no draft, and the basement felt colder, like the warmth had been sucked out. Jake, trying to lighten the mood, asked, "You got any secrets, Zozo?" The board spelled SEYOU, and before we could react, one of the candles tipped over, spilling wax across the carpet. We yelped, yanking our hands off the planchette, and Sarah blew out the candles, plunging us into near darkness. "That's enough," she said, her voice shaking. We packed up the board, shoving it into Jake's backpack, and tried to laugh it off, blaming the wind or our nerves. But none of us slept well that night, sprawled across sleeping bags, jumping at every creak of the house. The next day, we were shaken but tried to move on. Jake, always a daredevil, suggested we check out an abandoned radar base about 20 miles out of town, a place we'd heard rumors about. Ghosts, weird lights, the usual small-town lore. It was a decommissioned military site from the Cold War, all crumbling concrete and rusted fences, tucked into the foothills. We piled into Liam's beat-up Jeep, the air crisp with the smell of pine, and drove out, our Ouija board experience still lingering like a bad taste. The base was eerie, its empty buildings looming under a gray sky, broken windows staring like empty eyes. We wandered through, snapping photos with Mia's digital camera, climbing over debris and joking to shake off the unease. I posed by a rusted radar dish, throwing up a peace sign, while Sarah and Liam explored a control room filled with shattered monitors. Jake and Mia found a basement level, its stairs slick with moss, and we all followed, our laughter echoing in the damp, cavernous space. That night, back at my place, we uploaded Mia's photos to my laptop, excited to see our adventure. But as we scrolled through, we found something chilling. Mixed in with our pictures were files we didn't remember taking, grainy images of the radar base, but from angles we hadn't shot, like someone else had been there. One showed the control room, but with a shadowy figure in the corner, its face blurred. Another was of me by the radar dish, but taken from above, impossible from where we'd been standing. Then there was a video, 30 seconds long, shaky footage of us walking through the basement, our voices muffled but recognizable. The camera panned to a corner, where a pair of eyes glinted in the dark before the video cut off. We sat there, frozen, the glow of the laptop screen casting our faces in pale light. "Who the hell took these?" Jake whispered, his usual bravado gone. Mia was crying, saying, "It's Zozo. It followed us." We deleted the files, our hands shaking, and burned the Ouija board in my backyard, the flames licking at the wood as we watched in silence. But the fear didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, we all felt watched. I'd hear faint whispers in my room at night, like static from a radio, and my laptop would turn on by itself, the screen flickering. Sarah found scratches on her bedroom door, too deep to be from her cat. Liam, the skeptic, admitted he'd seen a shadow move in his mirror, and Mia refused to sleep alone, staying at her sister's place. We stopped going to radar base, but the feeling of being followed clung to us, a weight we couldn't shake. One night, I was alone, my parents out of town, the house too quiet. I was in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I heard a thud from the basement. My heart raced, memories of the Ouija board, and those photos flooding back. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, its grip worn from years of pickup games, and crept downstairs, the floorboards cold under my bare feet. The basement door was open, though I swore I'd locked it. I flicked on the light, my breath shallow, and saw nothing but the usual clutter: boxes, a ping-pong table, old bikes. Then I heard a low, guttural laugh, coming from the corner where we played with the board. I swung the bat, shouting, "Get out!" but the room was empty. I ran upstairs, locked the door, and called Jake, who came over with Liam. We stayed up till dawn, too scared to sleep, convincing ourselves it was just our minds playing tricks. We never touched a Ouija board again, and we don't talk about that night. Not really. The radar base was demolished a year later, replaced by a strip mall, but I still drive the long way around to avoid that road. I can't shake the feeling that something, Zozo or not, saw us, marked us. Was it a spirit, a prankster we didn't notice, or something worse? The not knowing is what keeps me up at night, checking the locks, listening for that laugh in the dark. I keep Mia's old camera in a box, its memory card wiped, but sometimes I wonder if I should have kept those files, if they held the key to understanding what we unleashed. It was well past midnight when my phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the heavy silence of the hotel room like a knife. My eyes snapped open, the darkness disorienting, wrapping me in a moment of confusion as my heart thudded against my ribs. I fumbled for the phone on the nightstand, my fingers clumsy, squinting at the bright screen that burned my vision. Front desk, the caller ID read. I hesitated, my pulse quickening, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Who calls at this hour? Swallowing the dryness of my throat, I answered, my voice rough with sleep. Hello. Good evening, Mr. Taylor. Came the reply, calm and polished, the kind of professional tone honed by years of customer service. I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, but we need to check your room for a potential safety concern. Would you mind opening the door for our staff? I sat up, rubbing my eyes, the fog of sleep still clouding my thoughts. Is this really necessary? I asked, glancing at the clock. 12:47 a.m., the red digits stark against the dark. It's the middle of the night. I understand, sir, the voice continued, unruffled, smooth as glass. We received a report about a possible gas leak, and we need to verify the safety of all guests. It'll only take a moment. A gas leak? My mind raced, fragment of half-formed thoughts colliding. I scanned the room, the shadows stretching long and heavy across the carpet. The faint hum of the air conditioner the only sound. All right, fine, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I'll be ready. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Taylor. The line clicked, and the screen went dark, plunging the room back into silence. I swung my legs out of bed, the sheets rustling softly, and pulled on the sweatpants I'd left draped over a chair, the fabric cool against my skin. The hotel room felt colder than it should, a bone-deep chill that seeped into me, making every movement feel slightly off, as the air itself was watching. I shuffled to the door, my bare feet sinking into the carpet, and peered through the peephole. The hallway stretched empty before me, lit only by the faint, greenish glow of the exit sign at the far end, its light pooling in the corners like spilled ink. No one was there. A shiver of doubt crept up my spine, sharp and insistent, urging me to double-check, to call back and confirm. I lingered, my hand hovering over the phone, but before I could act, a soft knock broke the silence. 3 quick taps, precise and deliberate. I leaned closer to the peephole again, my breath catching. The man standing outside was a night receptionist I'd seen when I checked in earlier that evening, tall, late 30s, with dark hair neatly combed and a gray suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. He had that weary corporate look, the kind worn by people who work too many late shifts, their eyes shadowed by fatigue. Relief washed over me, mingling with a lingering unease, a fragile reassurance that this was just routine. All right, get together, I muttered to myself, unlocking the door with a click that seemed too loud in the quiet. I pulled the door open, and he offered the same polite smile he'd given me at check-in, his lips curving just enough to be professional. "Good evening, Mr. Taylor," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "Apologies for the disturbance." He held up a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the dimness. "I just need to take a quick look around." I stepped aside, my nerves still taut, a faint buzz of adrenaline humming in my veins. "It's fine," I said, my tone clipped. "Just make it quick, all right?" He nodded and stepped inside, his movements fluid, practiced, the flashlight's beam sweeping over the room with an efficiency that spoke of routine. I watched him closely, leaning against the wall, my arms crossed to steady myself. The light danced over the bed, its rumpled sheets a testament to my restless sleep, then moved to the desk, cluttered with my keys and a half-empty water bottle, and finally to the small armchair in the corner, its upholstery faded but clean. He paused by the window, inspecting the seal with a slow, deliberate tilt of his head, then turned toward the bathroom, his steps silent on the carpet. "Is everything okay?" I asked, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling, an instinctive reaction to the way he moved. Too precise, too controlled. "Everything seems fine so far," he said, but his tone was off, too flat, too rehearsed, like a line read from a script. The flashlight's beam flicked across the bathroom mirror, catching the glass in a brief, blinding flare, then swept back again. He leaned in, his head cocked slightly, as if listening for something, a faint hiss perhaps, or the whisper of escaping gas. The motion felt wrong, staged, and my unease deepened, a knot tightening in my gut. I shifted my weight, my arms tightening across my chest. "So a gas leak, huh?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Shouldn't there be an alarm or something?" He turned, and for a split second, I thought I saw his smile slip, a fleeting crack in his composure. Gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Usually, yes," he said, his voice steady, but there was a slight edge to it now, a tension that hadn't been there before. "But sometimes the system can be unreliable. We prefer to check manually, just in case." His answer didn't sit right, a puzzle piece that didn't fit, but I forced a nod, my eyes tracking his every move. He moved to the minibar, crouching down to open the small fridge door, the flashlight's beam dancing over the tiny bottles of vodka and overpriced snacks. A jolt of irritation surged through me, cutting through the fog of fear. What's that got to do with a gas leak? I snapped, unable to keep the edge out of my voice, my hands clenching at my sides. He looked up, his polite smile returning, but it was hollow, his eyes dark and unreadable, devoid of warmth. "Just covering all bases," he said, his tone light, almost dismissive. But it did nothing to ease the discomfort churning in my gut. The way he moved, so precise, almost robotic, felt wrong, too deliberate, like a predator mimicking human behavior. I took a step back, my instincts screaming, my hands flexing as if preparing for a fight. The phone on the desk buzzed, its screen lighting up with front desk, again, the sudden vibration shattering the tense silence. I stared at it, my mind scrambling to make sense of the impossible. The receptionist was standing right in front of me, his flashlight still trained on the mini bar. Who was calling? My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, my eyes locked on the man in my room. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Taylor." A voice said, calm, professional. The same voice I'd heard a moment ago. The same voice belonging to the man now standing in my room. "We apologize for the inconvenience, but we'll be sending someone up shortly to check your room. Please stay inside and keep your door locked until our staff arrives." The world tilted, a wave of cold dread washing over me, my breath catching in my throat. "What?" I choked out, my grip tightening on the phone. "Who is this?" "Front desk, sir," the voice replied, unwavering. "Please remain where you are." I hung up, my hand shaking so badly. The phone nearly slipped from my fingers, my knuckles white against the plastic. I turned to the man in my room, his polite expression unchanged, his eyes meeting mine with a chilling calm. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking, fear and anger warring in my chest. The fake receptionist straightened, his flashlight clicking off, plunging the room into near darkness, the only light now the faint glow from the street outside. "Mr. Taylor," he said, his tone still eerily calm, "I'm just doing my job." He took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back, my back hitting the wall with a dull thud, the impact jarring. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling, the fear rising like bile in my throat. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave." His smile widened. It was all wrong. Too sharp, too deliberate. A predator's grin that sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Now, Mr. Taylor, there's no need for that," he said, his voice smooth, almost soothing, but it carried a menace that made my skin crawl. "I just need to finish my check." He reached for his pocket, his movement slow, deliberate, and panic snapped inside me like a taut wire breaking. I grabbed the lamp off the nightstand, yanking the cord from the wall with a sharp tug, and brandished it like a weapon, its weight heavy in my hands. I said, "Get out." I shouted, my voice raw, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. For a moment, he just stared at me, his eyes unblinking, as if weighing his options, calculating. Then, with a small sigh, he backed away, raising his hands in mock surrender, the gesture almost theatrical. "All right," he said, his tone light, almost amused. "No need for violence. I'll see myself out." He moved slowly to the door, his eyes never leaving mine, a silent challenge in their depths. My fingers tightened on the lamp, my breath held, every muscle tensed. When he reached the door, he paused, his hand on the handle, his gaze flicking to the lamp in my hand, then back to my face. "You have a good night, Mr. Taylor," he said, his voice dripping with chilling sincerity. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed was suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I stood there, the lamp still raised, my breath coming in shallow gasps, my body locked in a state of fight or flight, every instinct screaming that the danger hadn't passed. The phone buzzed again, and I jumped, nearly dropping the lamp, the sound jarring in the quiet. The screen glowed with front desk, and my hand shook as I picked it up, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello, Mr. Taylor. Are you all right?" The voice was different this time, older, rougher, laced with urgency. "This is the actual front desk. We received reports of disturbance on your floor." I swallowed, the room spinning, my knees weak. "Someone was just in my room," I said, my voice trembling, the words tumbling out. "He said he was checking for a gas leak." He looked like the receptionist. There was a brief, tense silence, a pause that felt like an eternity. "Sir," the voice said, slow and deliberate, "we don't have anyone assigned to check rooms tonight, and our night receptionist is currently at the desk." The world dropped out from under me, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin, my breath hitching. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, the phone slipping in my grip. "Please lock your door and do not open it for anyone," the voice continued, firm but strained. "Security is on its way." I hung up, my hands numb, and bolted the door, the metal sliding into place with a reassuring click. I shoved the armchair under the handle, its legs scraping against the carpet, a makeshift barrier against the unknown. My breaths came fast and shallow, my eyes darting around the room, the shadows in the corners seeming to pulse with menace. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see that man's face staring back at me from the other side of the glass, his sharp smile etched in the darkness. But the window was empty, the streetlights casting a faint, sterile glow. Minutes dragged by, each one an eternity, the silence broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the building settling. I stood there, clutching the lamp, my body tense, waiting for another sound. A footstep, a knock, the whisper of a voice. A sharp rap at the door made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. "Mr. Taylor?" A voice called, muffled but authoritative. "This is hotel security. Are you all right in there?" I didn't move at first, my body frozen, my mind racing with doubt. "Prove it," I yelled, my voice hoarse, trembling. There was a pause. Then the voice came again, steady and calm. "Sir, my name is Officer Harris. We've got your situation logged with the front desk. We need to check if you're okay." I approached the peephole, my heart pounding, my hand hovering over the chair. Through the distorted lens, I saw a man in a security uniform, his face lined and tired, a flashlight clipped to his belt. I hesitated, my fingers tightening on the chair, then slowly pulled it away, cracking the door open just enough to see him clearly, my grip on the handle unyielding. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low, barely more than a whisper. Officer Harris held up his flashlight, his expression grim, his eyes scanning the hallway behind him. "We got reports of an intruder on this floor," he said, his voice low, professional. "You weren't the only one he visited tonight." "Who was he?" I asked, my throat tight, the memory of that sharp smile burning in my mind. "We're still investigating," Harris said, his jaw tightening, a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "It looks like someone's been impersonating hotel staff to gain access to rooms. We had a few incidents like this before. Usually they're after valuables. It's rare they confront guests directly." The room felt colder now, the air heavy with the weight of his words. "And the cameras?" I asked, my voice trembling, a desperate hope that there might be evidence, some trace of the man. Harris's eyes darkened, his lips pressing into a thin line. "The cameras on this floor were tampered with," he said, his tone clipped. "We don't have any footage from tonight." A chill ran down my spine, my stomach twisting. "So what now?" I asked, my voice barely audible, the lamp still heavy in my hand. "Stay in your room. Lock the door," Harris said, his gaze steady, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We've got extra patrols, and we're contacting local authorities." He gave me a nod, meant to be reassuring, but it felt hollow. "We'll find this guy." I nodded, closing the door and bolting it again, the chair scraping back into place under the handle. I sank into the armchair, my back to the wall, the lamp resting across my lap, my eyes darting to the shadows in the corners of the room. The adrenaline still coursed through me, a restless energy that kept sleep at bay. The rest of the night, I stayed awake, listening for any sound, a footstep, a knock, the faintest whisper of movement. But the hallway remained quiet, the shadows still, the hotel holding its breath. By dawn, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, a heavy ache that weighed me down. I packed my things in a daze, not caring that I was leaving a day early, the need to escape overwhelming every other thought. My suitcase zipped shut with a finality that felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of control. As I handed in my key at the front desk, the real receptionist, a young woman with a tired smile, not the man from the night before, looked up from her computer. "I'm so sorry for the trouble, Mr. Taylor," she said, her voice genuine, tinged with regret. "We'll be increasing security measures moving forward." I nodded, my throat tight, unable to muster more than a curt thanks. As I stepped outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The air crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating terror of the night. The weight of those hours lifted just a little. The open sky a promise of freedom. But as I walked to my car, my keys jingling in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting, his sharp smile etched in the corners of my mind like a scar that would never fade. The scalpel gleamed in the dim light of the barn, its blade encrusted with dried blood, a silent testament to horrors I couldn't yet comprehend. My stomach churned as I took in the scene. Surgical instruments scattered across a makeshift operating table, their metal surfaces glinting with a cold menace. The air was thick with the acrid bite of antiseptic, undercut by a darker, more sinister odor. Something raw, organic, and wrong. What kind of veterinary emergency had I stumbled into? My name is Dr. Miguel Hernandez, and as a rural veterinarian with over a decade of experience in the rolling hills of Central California, I thought I'd seen it all. Broken bones, infected wounds, desperate farmers begging me to save their livestock. But nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare I uncovered on that isolated farm. It began with a phone call, the kind that comes just as you're locking up for the night, your body already dreaming of rest. I was shutting down my clinic, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, when my phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet. The voice on the other end was gruff, speaking rapid-fire Spanish with a distinct Michoacan accent, laced with urgency. "Doctor, you need to come quick. It's an emergency." I sighed, rubbing my eyes, the weight of a long day pressing down on me. All I wanted was a cold beer and the comfort of my bed, but duty was a relentless taskmaster. "What's the nature of the emergency, Senor Ramirez?" I asked, grabbing a notepad from the counter. "Antonio Ramirez," he said, his voice tight, almost frantic. "It's my prize bull. He's in a bad way. Please, you have to come now." There was an edge of panic in his tone that set off alarm bells in my head, a raw fear that went beyond a sick animal. I jotted down the address, a farm about 30 miles outside of town, and told him I'd be there as soon as I could. "Hang tight. I'm on my way," I said, already mentally cataloging the supplies I'd need. Antibiotics, bandages, maybe a sedative if the bull was in distress. The drive took me deep into the countryside, far from the small town where I'd built my practice. The winding dirt roads twisted through fields of golden grass and gnarled oak trees, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple, a fleeting beauty that did little to ease a growing unease in my chest. Darkness was closing in fast, and I cursed myself for not grabbing a more powerful flashlight, the weak beam of my pocket light barely cutting through the dusk. The isolation of the area pressed against me, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under my tires and the occasional cry of a distant coyote. Finally, a weathered sign came into view, its faded letters announcing Rancho Ramirez. I turned onto an even narrower road, the path rutted and uneven, my truck jostling as I navigated the final stretch. The farmhouse appeared first, a modest two-story structure that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades, its windows dark and uninviting. Behind it loomed a massive barn, its once red exterior faded to a dusty rust. The wood splintered and peeling. I pulled up in front of the barn and killed the engine. The sudden silence oppressive, heavy with an unnatural stillness. No barking dogs greeted me, no lowing cattle, just a faint whisper of wind rustling through the surrounding trees, carrying a chill that seeped into my bones. "Hello," I called, grabbing my medical bag from the passenger seat, the leather handle worn smooth from years of use. "Mr. Ramirez?" My voice echoed in the empty yard, unanswered, a tendril of unease curling tighter in my gut. Something felt off, a subtle wrongness I couldn't pinpoint, like the air itself was holding its breath. The barn door was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning from within. I pushed it open, wincing at the loud creak of rusted hinges, the sound jarring in the quiet. "Mr. Ramirez? It's Dr. Hernandez," I said, stepping inside. "I'm here about your bull." The interior was cloaked in shadow, lit only by a single bare bulb hanging from the rafters, its weak light casting long, distorted shapes across the wooden walls. As my eyes adjusted to gloom, two realizations hit me like a punch to the chest. There were no animals in sight, no bull, no livestock, not even a faint rustle of hay, and the air reeked of blood and disinfectant, a combination that set my nerves on edge. Then I saw it. The operating table, a crude wooden slab in the center of the barn, strewn with surgical instruments, scalpels, forceps, clamps, their surfaces stained with dark, crusted residue. My brain struggled to make sense of the scene. This wasn't a setup for treating livestock. It looked like something out of a horror movie, a makeshift surgical suite for purposes I didn't want to imagine. Before I could process further, the low rumble of an engine broke the silence, growing louder as headlights swept across the barn's interior, illuminating the grim tableau in stark relief. A vehicle pulled up outside, its tires crunching against the gravel. Panic seized me, a primal instinct screaming that whoever was coming, I didn't want to be found here. I scanned the barn frantically, my heart pounding, and spotted a stack of hay bales in the corner, their edges frayed and dusty. Without thinking, I dove behind them, the straw scratching at my arms as I crouched low, my medical bag clutched to my chest. My pulse roared in my ears, so loud I was sure it would betray me. The barn door swung open wider, and voices drifted in, sharp and tense. I held my breath, straining to hear, my body pressed against the ruffle of the barn wall. "Told you should have cleaned up first," one man said, his tone annoyed, edged with frustration. "What if the doc showed up early?" "Relax," another voice replied, and I recognized it instantly. Antonio Ramirez, his Michoacan accent unmistakable, though now it carried a cold confidence that chilled me. I made sure to give him the long way around. We got plenty of time. I peered through a narrow gap in the hay bales, my blood running cold as three men entered the barn. They were dressed in dark clothes, each wearing a surgical mask that obscured their faces, but it was what they carried that made my stomach lurch. A body, wrapped in a black plastic sheet, its weight sagging between them. They laid it on the operating table with a dull thud, and one of the men, not Ramirez, pulled back the plastic. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. It was a young woman, her face pale, her eyes closed, unconscious, or worse, a possibility I couldn't bear to consider. "Jesus, Tony," the third man said, his voice shaky, his hands trembling as he stepped back. "You said this was going to be easy money. You didn't say nothing about this." Ramirez snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "What did you think we were doing? Pendejo? Selling Girl Scout cookies?" He picked up the blood cake scalpel I'd noticed earlier, turning it over in his hands, the blade catching the light with a menacing glint. "Now shut up and help me prep. We don't have all night." My mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of fear and disbelief. What the hell had I stumbled into? An organ harvesting operation? Human trafficking? The scene before me was a grotesque violation of everything I'd sworn to uphold as a doctor. I needed to get out, to call the police, to do something. But how? I was trapped, outnumbered, unarmed, with no clear path to safety. As if mocking my desperation, my phone chose that moment to vibrate in my pocket, a low buzz that felt deafening in the tense silence. I froze, my heart lurching, praying they hadn't heard it. Ramirez's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the barn, his body tensing like a predator sensing prey. "Did you hear that?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. I held my breath, willing myself to become invisible, my muscles rigid, my phone pressed against my thigh to muffle any further vibrations. The barn was silent, the air thick with suspicion. Then, mercifully, a cow lowed in the distance, its mournful cry breaking the tension. Ramirez relaxed, chuckling, though the sound was devoid of humor. "Guess I'm getting jumpy in my old age," he said, turning back to the table. "Come on, let's get started." I watched in horror as they began to prep for what was clearly a gruesome procedure, their movements clinical, practiced, as if this was routine. The woman lay motionless, her chest rising faintly, alive, but barely, her vulnerability a knife in my chest. I had to do something. But what? If I tried to run, they'd catch me before I reached my truck. If I stayed hidden, I'd be witness to a murder, complicit in my inaction. My mind churned, weighing impossible options, when my elbow brushed against something solid behind the hay bales. I turned, squinting in the dimness, and felt a surge of hope. It was an old pitchfork, its tines rusted but sharp, the wooden handle worn but sturdy. I gripped it, the ruffle familiar in my palms, a reminder of my childhood on a farm not unlike this one. I knew how to use this tool and how much damage it could do. Taking a deep breath, I made my decision. I couldn't sit by and let this happen. Couldn't let that woman's life end on that table. Consequences be damned. I had to act. In one fluid motion, I stood, my muscles coiled, and hurled the pitchfork across the barn. It sailed through the air, a blur of rust and wood, missing Ramirez by inches and embedding itself in a wooden wall with a resounding thunk that echoed like a gunshot. The men whirled around, their eyes wide with shock, their masks shifting as they scanned the shadows. For a split second, time froze, the barn silent except for the faint hum of the bulb overhead. Then I ran, my legs pumping, adrenaline coursing through me like fire. I sprinted for the barn door, my medical bag abandoned, my focus narrowed to the sliver of night beyond the threshold. Behind me, shouts erupted, the pounding of feet shaking the floor. Get him! Ramirez bellowed, his voice raw with fury. Don't let him get away. I burst out of the barn and into the cool night air, the stars a blur above me, my truck a beacon just yards away. If I could reach it, I might have a chance. A hand grabbed the back of my shirt, yanking me backward with brutal force, my momentum faltering. I stumbled, nearly falling, but twisted free, my body acting on instinct. Without thinking, I lashed out with my fist, connecting solidly with someone's jaw, the impact sending a jolt up my arm. There was a grunt of pain, and the grip on my shirt loosened. I didn't wait to see who I'd hit. I ran, my lungs burning, my keys fumbling in my hand as I reached the driver's side door. Just as my fingers closed around the handle, I heard the unmistakable sound of the gun being cocked, sharp and final. Don't move, Doc, Ramirez said, his voice cold as ice, cutting through the night. Turn around. Slowly. I did as he said, raising my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. Ramirez stood a few feet away, a pistol trained on my chest, its barrel steady in his grip. Behind him, his two accomplices emerged from the barn, one rubbing his jaw where I'd struck him, his eyes blazing with anger. Ramirez's face was a mass of controlled rage, his lips twisting into a humorless smile. I gotta hand it to you, he said, his voice low, mocking. You've got cojones, but you should have minded your own business. This is my business, I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded, despite the fear clawing at my chest. I'm a doctor. I took an oath to do no harm. Ramirez laughed, a harsh, barking sound that grated against the quiet. Noble, he said, his smile widening, though it held no warmth. Stupid, but noble. He gestured with the gun, the barrel glinting in the moonlight. Get back in the barn. We'll deal with you after we're done with our patient. I took a step forward, my mind racing, searching for an opening, a way to disarm him. If I could just get closer, maybe I could. Suddenly, the night was shattered by flashing red and blue lights, their glow cutting through the darkness like a beacon. A police siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer, the sound of lifeline in the chaos. Ramirez's eyes widened, panic flickering across his face. How did they? He started but never finished. Seizing the moment, I lunged forward, tackling him to the ground, my shoulders slamming into his chest. The gun went off, the sound deafening, a white-hot pain searing through my side as we hit the dirt. I ignored it, my focus narrowed to keeping Ramirez pinned, my hands grappling for the pistol. His accomplices took off running, their footsteps fading into the darkness, abandoning their leader without a backward glance. Ramirez struggled beneath me, cursing and spitting, his strength fueled by desperation. But I held on, my vision blurring at the edges as blood seeped through my shirt. Police cars screeched to a halt in front of the barn, their tires kicking up clouds of dust, officers pouring out with weapons drawn, their shouts a chaotic symphony. "Hands up! Drop the weapon!" someone yelled, their voice sharp, authoritative. Hands pulled me off Ramirez, strong but careful, and I collapsed onto the ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Someone was asking if I was all right, their voice distant, muffled, as if underwater. The woman, I managed to gasp, my hand clutching my side, blood slick against my fingers. "In the barn, help her." The world tilted sideways, the stars above spinning, and everything went black. I woke 3 days later in a hospital bed, my body stitched up and heavy with painkillers. The sterile scent of antiseptic a stark contrast to the barn's grim odor. The local sheriff sat by my bedside, his notebook open, eager to take my statement. He told me the woman in the barn had survived, airlifted to a trauma center where she was recovering, her life spared by my intervention. Ramirez and his accomplices were in custody, facing a litany of charges: kidnapping, attempted murder, human trafficking, and more. The barn, it turned out, had been a hub for an underground organ harvesting ring, a secret the police had been closing in on for months. My emergency call, the sheriff explained, had triggered an automatic alert to local law enforcement, a safety measure I'd set up years ago after a close call with a rabid dog, but had long since forgotten. The alert had brought them to farm just in time, a stroke of luck I hadn't dared hope for. The local press was calling me a hero, a label that sat uncomfortably on my shoulders, the weight of it more burdensome than flattering. As I lay in that hospital bed, the hum of the monitors a steady rhythm, I replayed the events of that night, each moment etched in vivid detail. The glint of the scalpel, the woman's pale face, the cold steel of Ramirez's gun. I couldn't help but think how close I'd come to ignoring that late-night call, how easy it would have been to say no, to drive home and crack open that beer, to let someone else deal with the emergency. But that's not who I am. That's not why I became a veterinarian. I got into this profession to help those who can't help themselves, be they animal or human, to stand between life and death when no one else will. And if that means walking into danger, facing down monsters in the dark, then so be it. It's part of the job, part of the oath I took, not just to do no harm, but to act when others might turn away. As the pain in my side throbbed, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything, I knew I'd make the same choice again, because some fights are worth it, no matter the cost. The first time I noticed the car, I brushed it off as a coincidence, a fleeting quirk of the morning commute. By the third day, unease had settled in my gut, heavy and cold, like a stone I couldn't dislodge. After a week, I knew with chilling certainty that I was being followed. My daily routine transformed into a waking nightmare. My name is Edith, and what began as an ordinary drive to work became a descent into fear. Each mile shadowed by a predator I couldn't escape. It started on a Monday, as most terrible things seem to, the kind of day that feels cursed from the moment you wake up. I was running late, cursing under my breath as I navigated the snarl of morning traffic, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The radio a low hum of static and chatter. That's when I first saw it, a nondescript gray sedan. 3 cars behind me, blending seamlessly into the sea of commuters. There was nothing remarkable about it. No flashy rims, no distinctive decals. Just another anonymous vehicle in the urban tide. But something made me take notice, a prickle at the back of my neck, an instinctive warning I couldn't explain. I shook it off, chalking up the stress, lack of sleep, the weight of a looming deadline at work. Just my imagination, I told myself, forcing my eyes back to the road. But the next day, there was again, same make, same model, same precise distance behind me, close enough to keep pace but never quite catching up, a ghost in my rearview mirror. My stomach tightened, a flicker of doubt creeping in, but I pushed it down, rationalizing it away. Maybe it was just someone who worked near my office, taking the same route by chance. Coincidences happen, I reasoned, gripping the wheel a little harder, my knuckles pale against the leather. By Wednesday, paranoia had taken root, its tendrils wrapping around my thoughts, squeezing tighter with every glance in the mirror. I began taking different routes to work, turning down side streets at random, weaving through unfamiliar neighborhoods, even doubling back on myself in a desperate bid to shake the feeling of being watched. But no matter what I did, the gray sedan was always there, a persistent shadow that matched my every move with eerie precision. It would appear around a corner, slide into traffic behind me, or wait at a stoplight, always 3 cars back, its tinted windows an impenetrable mask. The coincidences piled up, too many to dismiss, too deliberate to ignore, and by Friday, fear had replaced doubt, a cold certainty that this was no accident. That evening, I broke down and called my best friend Wolfen, my voice tight with barely contained panic as I gripped the phone, my apartment's dim light casting long shadows across the walls. "Wolf, I need your help," I said, the words spilling out raw and urgent. "I think someone's following me." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy silence that made my heart race faster. When Wolfen spoke, his tone was careful, measured, the way you'd talk to someone standing on a ledge. "Okay, Edith, tell me everything." I poured out the story, my words tumbling over each other in a rush, as if saying them aloud could exorcise the fear. I paced my small apartment, the hardwood floor creaking under my steps, my eyes darting to windows every few seconds, half expecting to see that damn gray sedan parked on the street below, its headlights glinting like eyes in the dark. I told him about the car, the routes, the unshakable feeling of being hunted. When I finished, my breath ragged. Wolfen was quiet for a long moment, the silent stretching taut between us. "Have you seen the driver?" he asked finally, his voice steady, grounding. I shook my head, then remembered he couldn't see me. "No," I said, my voice small, trembling. "The windows are tinted. I can't make out anything inside." "All right," Wolfen said, his tone shifting to the decisive edge I remember from our college days, when he'd been the one to pull me through late-night study sessions and existential crises. "Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, I'll follow you to work. I'll stay far enough back that whoever's tailing you won't notice, but close enough to keep an eye on things. We'll see if we can catch this bastard in the act." Relief washed over me, so strong it made my knees weak, a wave that nearly brought me to tears. "Thank you, Wolf," I said, my voice cracking. I was starting to think I was going crazy. "Hey," he said, his voice softening, a faint smile audible in his words. "We're friends who have not to help catch your stalkers." His attempt at levity fell flat, the humor swallowed by the weight of my fear, but I appreciated the effort. A small anchor in the storm. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the sky a heavy blanket of clouds that mirrored my mood. As I pulled out of my driveway, my car's wipers swiping rhythmically against the rain, I spotted Wolfen's red pickup 2 blocks back, its familiar bulk a reassuring presence. Knowing he was there steadied my nerves, but my hand still shook slightly on the steering wheel, my fingers cold despite the heater's warmth. For the first 10 minutes of my drive, everything seemed normal. No sign of the gray sedan, no shadow in my mirror. I began to relax, my shoulders loosening, a fragile hope blooming that maybe I'd imagined it all, that stress had conjured a phantom where none existed. Then, as I turned onto the highway on-ramp, I saw it, the gray sedan, sliding into traffic 3 cars behind me, moving with a predator's casual grace, its sleek form cutting through the drizzle like a shark through water. My heart rate spiked, sweat beating on my forehead despite the cool air from the AC. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white, my breath shallow. "Okay, stay calm," I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Wolf's right behind you. Everything's going to be fine." But as the miles ticked by, A new worry gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. What if the person following me had noticed Wolfen? What if they decided to do something drastic? To escalate beyond silent pursuit? My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, hitting the speed dial for Wolfen's number, the screen glowing in the dimness of the car. He picked up on the first ring, his voice sharp, alert. "I see him, Edith," he said without preamble. "Gray sedan, about 3 cars back, right?" "Yes." I breathed, relief flooding through me, though it did little to dull the edge of my fear. "What do we do now?" "Just keep driving normally," he said, his tone calm but firm, a commander in a crisis. "I'm going to try to get closer, see if I can make out a license plate." I nodded, then remembered again that he couldn't see me, my voice shaky as I replied, "Okay, be careful, Wolf." The next few minutes were a study in tension, my eyes flicking constantly between the road ahead and my rear-view mirror, the sedan's shape a constant thread in my peripheral vision. I saw Wolfen's red pickup change lanes, its movement slow and deliberate, working its way closer to Gray's sedan, a hunter stalking its prey. My pulse pounded in my ears, each second stretching into eternity, the rain a soft drumbeat against the windshield. And then, in an instant, everything went to hell. The sedan suddenly accelerated, its engine roaring as it cut off 2 cars, tires squealing on the wet pavement, and slid in directly behind me, so close I could no longer see its headlights in my mirror. My breath caught in my throat, a gasp escaping as panic gripped me, my hands trembling on the wheel. "Wolf." I cried into the phone, my voice cracking with fear. "He's right behind me." "I see him," Wolfen growled, his voice taut with urgency. "Hang on, I'm coming up on your right." But before Wolfen could reach me, the sedan made its move. It swerved into right lane, its engine snarling, and gunned forward, pulling up alongside me, its tinted windows level with my own. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to the sleek gray shape beside me, the rain streaking across its surface like tears. The passenger window rolled down with faint hum, and I turned, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst, to finally see the face of my stalker. The man behind the wheel was utterly ordinary, middle-aged, graying at the temples, with wire-rimmed glasses perched on forgettable nose. He could have been an accountant, a high school math teacher, someone you'd pass in a grocery store without a second glance. But his eyes, God, his eyes were a different story. They burned with manic intensity, a feverish gleam that chilled me to my core, stripping away any illusion of normalcy. He smiled, a rictus grin that never reached those terrible eyes, his lips curling in a way that made my skin crawl. And then he spoke, his voice somehow carrying clearly over the rush of wind and traffic, a low, intimate drawl that felt like a violation. "Hello, Edith," he said. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." Before I could react, before I could even process the horror of his words, he jerked the steering wheel sharply to the left. Time snapped back into normal speed as his car slammed into mine, the impact a bone-rattling jolt that shuddered through my body. I heard the shriek of tearing metal, felt my car fishtail wildly, the tires screaming against the pavement as I fought to keep control. The world spun, a chaotic blur of rain and headlights, horns blaring, tires screeching. I caught a fleeting glimpse of Wolfen's red pickup, its grill looming as he tried desperately to reach me. And then everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors, the acrid smell of antiseptic sharp in my nose, my body heavy with pain and the fog of medication. Wolfen was there, slumped in a chair beside my bed, his face haggard with worry, his dark hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Edith, can you hear me?" he asked, leaning forward, his voice rough with relief as I stirred. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice a rasping whisper, each word a struggle. What happened?" Wolfen's expression darkened, his jaw tightening, a storm of emotions flickering across his face. Anger, guilt, fear. "You crashed," he said, his voice low controlled, but laced with a raw edge. "The guy who hit you, he's in custody. Turns out he's been stalking women all over the city. You're the first one who noticed, and the first one he tried to hurt. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, a mix of relief and residual terror that left me trembling. "It's over," I whispered, needing to hear it, needing the confirmation to anchor me. "It's over," Wolfen confirmed, squeezing my hand gently, his touch warm, grounding. "You're safe now." But as I drifted back into a drug-induced sleep, the hospital's sterile quiet wrapping around me, I couldn't shake the memory of those eyes, that voice. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." The words echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain that refused to fade. The accident had left me with a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, and a concussion, my body a map of bruises and pain. But the real damage, I realized, was deeper, a wound that no bandage could cover. My sense of safety, my trust in the world around me, had been shattered, replaced by a hypervigilance that made every car on the road a potential threat, every stranger's glance a possible menace. In the days that followed, as I lay in a hospital bed, the hum of the monitors a constant companion, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not let this break me. I would heal, my body knitting itself back together, my spirit forging new strength from the ashes of fear. I would recover, reclaiming my life one step at a time, one drive at a time. But I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that I would never again take for granted the simple act of getting in my car and driving to work. The ordinary had become terrifying, the line between safety and danger revealed to be perilously thin. The road ahead would be long, paved with nightmares and moments of doubt, but I was determined to travel it, to face each day with the courage I'd found in that moment of crisis. 1 mile at a time, I would move forward until the rearview mirror showed nothing but open road behind me, free of shadows, free of fear. And though the memory of that gray sedan would linger, a scar on my psyche, I would not let it define me. I was Edith, and I would drive on. When I returned to my hotel room after dinner, the door was slightly ajar, just a crack. So subtle it might have gone unnoticed, except I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd locked it before leaving. A chill swept down my spine, sharp and electric, freezing me in place, my hand hovering over the door handle, fingers trembling in the dim hallway light. My breath caught, and I leaned in, pressing my ear to the narrow gap, straining to hear anything, a voice, a footstep, the faintest hint of movement. Nothing, just the soft hum of the air conditioning unit echoing somewhere down the corridor. But the unease had already taken root, a cold weight settling deep in my chest, my instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. I should have called the front desk right then, should have turned around and marched downstairs to wait for security, safe in the brightly lit lobby. But a part of me, maybe the stubborn part, or maybe just a foolish one, refused to back down. Ignoring the warning bells in my head, I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking faintly, and flicked on the light switch. The room bloomed into view with a soft buzz of fluorescence, and I stood in the doorway, my eyes sweeping over every detail. Everything appeared normal. The bed neatly made, its white comforter untouched, the curtains drawn tightly against the night, my suitcase still zipped up by the closet, exactly where I'd left it. Yet the air felt heavy, charged, as if I'd stepped into someone else's space, an intruder in my own room. "Hello?" I called, my voice slicing to the silence, tentative but sharp. "Is anyone in here?" No response, just a faint hum of the mini fridge in the corner, its low drone a mocking reassurance. I took a cautious step inside, my sneakers silent on the carpet, my senses heightened, scanning every corner for something out of place, a shadow that didn't belong, a flicker of movement. I peeked into the bathroom, holding my breath. It was empty, the white towel still folded neatly on the rack, the mirror fog-free, the tiles gleaming under the overhead light. For a moment, I stood there, hand on my hip, staring back at the door, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe the latch hadn't caught properly when I left. Maybe housekeeping had slipped in for a late turn-down service, though I hadn't requested one, and the hour, well past 9 p.m., seemed unlikely for that. Trying to shake off the unease, I closed the door behind me, ensuring it clicked shut with a satisfying thud. I locked it, then tugged on the handle to double-check. The bolt holding firm. Secure. I muttered, though the word fell hollow. I moved to the bed, sitting down heavily, the mattress creaking under my weight. My phone buzzed on a nightstand, an email from work lighting up the screen. Another urgent task to tackle before tomorrow's meeting. I let out a sigh, rubbing my temple, the dull throb of a headache forming. It's nothing, I told myself, my voice barely audible. Just the stress of traveling alone. But that creeping, uncomfortable itch at the back of my neck refused to fade, a persistent whisper that I wasn't as safe as I wanted to believe. Later that night, after a long, hot shower, the tension began to melt away, the steam loosening the knots in my shoulders. I wrapped a towel around my waist, the fabric damp against my skin, and wiped the fog from the bathroom mirror. My reflection stared back, tired eyes shadowed by dark circles, damp hair sticking up in unruly spikes. I ran my fingers through it, exhaling a long, slow breath, the mirror's cool surface grounding me. Back in the bedroom, I dropped the towel and slipped into my pajamas, the soft cotton a small comfort. I was ready to crash, exhaustion pulling at me like a tide. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, setting an early alarm for the next day's meetings, the screen's glow casting a faint light across the room. As I set it down, my gaze caught on something odd, my wallet. It wasn't where I had left it. I was certain I had placed it on the desk near the TV before heading to dinner, a habit ingrained from years of travel. But now it lay on the floor by the foot of bed, as if it had been knocked off in a hurry. I frowned, bending to pick it up, the leather cool in my hand. I opened it, checking the contents. Cash still folded neatly, credit cards in their slots, ID untouched. Nothing was missing, but that strange itch in my chest spread, a cold unease that tightened my throat. I wasn't careless. I had a routine, especially on the road, and tonight that routine had been disrupted. First the door, now this. You're being paranoid, man, I muttered, forcing a smile, as if the empty room needed convincing. But the words felt like a lie, even to me. I crawled into bed, pulling the comforter up to my chin, and clicked off the bedside lamp. The room plunged into darkness, the silence wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. For a while, it was comforting, the exhaustion from a day of travel and meetings finally catching up, my eyelids growing heavy, my breathing slowing. Then came the sound, faint at first, barely audible over the air conditioner's hum, a soft shuffling, like something sliding across the carpet, deliberate and slow. My eyes snapped open, my body tensing, breath held as I strained to listen. There was again unmistakable, coming from the far side of the room, near the door. I sat up, my heart pounding against my ribs, the darkness suddenly oppressive, the shadows in the corners deeper, more menacing than they should have been. Slowly, I reached for my phone, the motion deliberate, my fingers trembling as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut to the dark, illuminating my face in a stark glow as I swept across the room. Everything seemed unchanged, the desk, its surface cluttered with my laptop and a half-empty coffee cup, the armchair, its cushions undisturbed, my suitcase, still zipped by the closet. But when the light landed on the door, my stomach dropped. It was open, not wide, just a crack, a sliver of darkness beyond. But I knew I had locked it. I had checked it, felt the bolt slide into place, tested the handle. Is someone there? I called, my voice tense, shattering the silence, a mix of fear and defiance. No answer. The door remained still, the hallway's darkness thick, impenetrable. I climbed out of bed, clutching my phone, the flashlight's beam shaking my grip. As I approached the door, every instinct screaming to turn back, to hide under the covers like a child. But I couldn't ignore it. I reached out, my hand trembling, and grabbed the handle, yanking the door open with a force that made the hinges groan. The hallway stretched empty before me, lit by the dim flicker of fluorescent lights, their hum a faint echo in the silence. I poked my head out, looking both ways, searching for a shadow, a footstep, the click of a closing door. Nothing, just the sterile quiet of a hotel at midnight. I stepped back inside, locking the door again, my fingers fumbled with the bolt, ensuring it was secure. My hand hovered over the latch, the hairs on my arm standing on end, a primal sense of exposure washing over me. I felt watched, the sensation so strong was almost tangible, like eyes boring into me from the shadows. Unable to ignore any longer, I grabbed my phone and dialed the front desk, my pulse racing as the line rang. "Front desk, this is Anna. How may I assist you?" The voice was friendly, calm. Too calm, a stark contrast of storm in my chest. "Hi. This is room 217, I said, hearing the tremor of my voice and hating it. "I think someone's been in my room. The door keeps opening, and I know I locked it." There was a pause, a beat of silence that felt too long. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," Anna said, her tone softening, though I caught a hint of concern. "Are you certain it wasn't housekeeping?" No one's supposed to be here at this hour, right?" I said, my voice sharper than intended, my eyes darting to the door. "That's correct, sir," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "Housekeeping is finished for the night. Would you like me to send someone up to check?" I hesitated, glancing around the room, the shadows seeming to pulse in the corners. "Yeah," I said finally, swallowing hard. "Please. I'd feel better if someone took a look." "We'll send security right away, sir," Anna said. "Please stay inside and keep the door locked." "Okay, thanks," I said, hanging up, the silence in the room heavier than before, pressing down like a physical weight. I grabbed a chair from the small table by the window, its wooden legs scraping against the carpet, and wedged it under the door handle, the makeshift barricade of small comfort. My breath came in shallow bursts, my body tense, ready for a threat I couldn't name. Maybe it was overkill, but the feeling that something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong, was unshakable. Minutes passed, each one stretching into eternity. The quiet broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the building settling. I paced the room, my socks silent on the carpet, checking the bathroom again, its tiles cold under my feet, opening the closet doors, the hangers swaying slightly, even kneeling to peer under the bed, the flashlight's beam revealing nothing but dust. It was just me, alone with my racing thoughts, the fear growing with every second of silence. Finally, a knock at the door, 3 firm raps, jarred me from my thoughts. "Hotel security, sir." A voice called, steady and professional. "Can you open up?" I pulled the chair away, my hands unsteady, and cracked the door open, peering out. A uniformed security guard stood in the hallway, a clipboard in hand, his middle-aged face lined with the weariness of a late shift. His expression was professional but unreadable, his eyes scanning me briefly before settling on the room behind me. "Evening, sir," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "Mind if I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside, the door creaking as it swung wider. "Thanks for coming," I said, my voice tight. "I swear, the door keeps opening and I don't know how. I've locked it twice now." He walked in, his boots soft on the carpet, and glanced around, shining his flashlight along the floor, the walls, the door frame. "Looks like the latch is intact," he said, his tone neutral, clinical. "Sometimes older locks don't catch properly." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up, but I checked it twice. I insisted, crossing my arms, my fingers digging into my biceps. I felt it lock. He gave me a polite nod, the kind that said he'd heard it all before, his pen scratching something on his clipboard. "I believe you, sir," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Sometimes these things happen. We'll have maintenance look at it tomorrow." He moved toward the door, giving me one last glance, his eyes flickering with a hint of sympathy, Or maybe it was just fatigue. I'd recommend keeping it locked and blocked for tonight, just in case. Yeah, already done that, I said, forcing a weak smile, though it felt like a grimace, my discomfort raw and exposed. Try to get some rest, he said, his voice softening slightly. Let us know if anything else happens. He stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind him with a click that echoed in the quiet room. I locked it again, sliding the chair back under the handle, its legs scraping against the carpet with a sound that set my teeth on edge. I climbed back into bed, but sleep felt impossible, the air heavy, oppressive, the kind that makes it hard to breathe. I lay awake for hours, staring at the dark ceiling, every creak of the building, every hum of the air conditioner making me flinch, my body coiled with tension. The shadows seemed to shift, stretching across the walls like reaching fingers, their edges blurred but menacing, as if the room itself was alive, watching. When I finally drifted off, it was restless, fitful, my dreams fragmented with images of open doors and unseen figures. I woke with the sound of the door creaking open, the noise sharp and unmistakable. My eyes snapped open, and I bolted upright, my heart thudding so loudly it seemed to fill the room. The chair I'd wedged under the handle had been pushed aside, its legs skewed at an angle, and the door was open, just a crack, a sliver of darkness beckoning from a hallway. I didn't move, didn't breathe, my gaze locked on that narrow gap, the air thick with dread. Then, from a hallway, a soft whisper, barely audible, like a breath against glass. Hello? The sound sent a jolt of fear through me, sharp and visceral, my skin prickling as if doused in ice. I grabbed my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight, the beam trembling as I aimed it toward the door. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow, but the whisper lingered, a violation that echoed in my mind. I scrambled out of bed, my legs unsteady, and grabbed the chair, shoving it back against the door with a force that rattled the frame. Who's there? I shouted, my voice breaking, raw with panic and defiance. No answer, just the oppressive silence, the hallway's emptiness of taunt. My hand shook as I dialed the front desk again, the phone pressed to my ear, the ringing a lifeline in the dark. It's happening again, I said when Anna answered, my voice hoarse, barely recognizable. Someone's messing with my door. We'll send someone up right away, sir, she replied, her voice calm, professional. But there was something different this time. Something cold, almost amused, a subtle shift that made my blood run cold. Please remain calm. The line went dead. The silence that followed heavier than ever, a suffocating weight that pressed against my chest. I stood there, staring at the door, the chair silhouette a flimsy barrier against the unknown. My flashlight beam flickered, the battery low, casting erratic shadows across the room. I knew I wasn't going to sleep again that night, not with the whisper still ringing in my ears, not with the certainty that something, or someone, was toying with me, their presence a shadow just beyond my sight. The hotel, once a place of temporary comfort, had become a maze of doubt and fear, each creak and whisper a reminder that safety was an illusion, and I was far from alone. The floorboard creaked under my foot, and I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, a wild rhythm that echoed in the silence. The beam of my flashlight wavered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls of the narrow hallway, their shapes twisting like specters in the dark. I held my breath, straining to hear any sound from the attic above. Nothing, just the oppressive stillness of our isolated farmhouse at 3 a.m., heavy and suffocating. But I knew what I'd seen, muddy footprints, stark against a hardwood floor, leading up to the attic door. Footprints that hadn't been there when I'd tucked the kids into bed just hours ago. Their present a violation that turned our home into a stranger's domain. My name is Wei Chun, and moving my family to this remote farm in rural Wisconsin was supposed to be our fresh start, a chance to build a new life. Instead, it had become a waking nightmare, each day unraveling the illusion of safety we'd so desperately sought. It all began 2 weeks ago, when we first arrived at the old farmhouse, our tires crunching on the gravel drive, the air thick with the scent of wild grass and possibility. My wife May and I have been thrilled to find such a spacious property within our budget, a rare gem after years of cramped city living in a one-bedroom apartment that barely contained our dreams. The idea of giving our children, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Tommy, room to run, to play, to grow up surrounded by fields and open sky was irresistible, a vision that fueled late-night conversations and hopeful plans. The realtor, a brisk woman with a practiced smile, had been vague about why the previous owners had sold so cheaply. Family emergency, she'd said, her lips tightening, her eyes avoiding ours. They had to move out of state rather suddenly. We should have pressed her, should have asked more questions, but the house's charm, its wraparound porch, its high ceilings, its promise of new beginning, blinded us to the warning signs. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in, cardboard boxes littering the floors, the kids' laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Lily and Tommy were ecstatic, racing to the sprawling farmhouse, exploring every nook and cranny, their small feet pounding against the hardwood. May and I were exhausted, our muscles aching from hauling furniture, but we were happy, our hearts full, feeling like we'd finally found our place in the world, a home where we could plant roots and watch them grow. Then, one morning over breakfast, Lily changed everything. "Daddy," she said, her little face serious as she pushed her cereal around her bowl. "There's a man who lives in our attic." I chuckled, ruffling her dark hair, her pigtails bouncing under my hand. "Is that so, sweetheart?" I said, my tone light, indulgent. "And what's this man's name?" Lily frowned, her brow furrowing as if she were solving a puzzle. "He didn't tell me," she said, "but he's nice. He gives me candy sometimes." The smile froze on my face, my spoon clattering against the bowl. I exchanged a worried glance with May, her eyes widening, a mirror of my own unease. "Lily," I said carefully, kneeling beside her chair, my voice steady despite the chill creeping down my spine, "you know you're not supposed to take candy from strangers, right?" She nodded solemnly, her brown eyes wide. "I know, Daddy, but he's not a stranger. He says he's lived here a long time." The words hit like a physical blow, a cold dread pooling in my stomach. I forced a smile, my mind racing. "Well," I said, keeping my tone light, "next time you see your attic friend, you come tell Mommy or Daddy right away, okay?" Lily agreed, but I could tell she didn't understand our concern. Her world still one of innocence, where new friends and candy were cause for joy, not fear. To her, it was just a game, a whimsical adventure in her new home. That night, after the kids were in bed, their soft snores filling the quiet, May and I searched the attic thoroughly, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. We found nothing but dust and cobwebs, old boxes left behind by the previous owners, their contents mundane, faded linens, chipped dishes, a child's broken toy. I told myself it was just Lily's imagination, sparked by the strangeness of a new place, but the uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach lingered, a quiet alarm that refused to be silenced. Over the next few days, small things began to go missing. A watch I'd left on the nightstand, its leather strap a gift from May, her favorite silver earrings, delicate hoops she wore every day, a half-empty package of cookies from the kitchen, their crinkled wrapper a staple of Tommy's snacks. We blamed it on the chaos of moving, on our own forgetfulness, the stress of adjusting to a new life. But deep down, I think we both knew something wasn't right, a truth we were too afraid to voice. Then came the noises, footsteps in the hallway when everyone was supposed to be asleep, the creak of doors opening and closing in the dead of night. Once, I could have sworn I heard a man's laughter, low and guttural, coming from the kids' room, but when I rushed in, my heart in my throat, they were both sound asleep, their faces peaceful under the glow of their nightlight. May wanted to call the police, her voice trembling as she clutched my arm, her eyes pleading. "Wait, this isn't normal," she said, her words sharp with fear. "We need help." But I hesitated, my pride, or maybe my denial, holding me back. What would we tell them? I said, my voice low, frustrated. That we think our house is haunted? That our daughter has an imaginary friend who might not be imaginary? They'd think we're crazy. So we waited and we watched, our nerves fraying with each passing day. We installed new locks on all the doors, the bolts gleaming with fresh metal, their weight a false promise of security. I bought a security camera system, spending hours wiring it up, the lenses trained on the hallways and entry points. But every morning, the footage was corrupted. Nothing but static, a gray haze that mocked our efforts. And then, tonight I saw the footprints. I'd gotten up to check on the kids, a habit I developed since moving in, my slippers soft against the floor as I moved through the darkened house. As I approached their room, my flashlight beam caught something on the hardwood, muddy footprints. Too large belonged to Lily or Tommy, their edges fresh, the dirt still damp. They led from the back door, through the kitchen, up the stairs, and toward the attic, a trail that sent a surge of adrenaline through me, fear and fury warring in my chest. Now, standing at the base of the attic stairs, I gripped the flashlight tighter in one hand, a heavy wrench in the other. Its cold metal a grounding weight. Part of me wanted to wake May, to call for help, to retreat to safety. But another part, the part that had always prided itself on being protector of this family, the one who fixed problems and kept the monsters at bay, pushed me forward. The attic door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning beyond. I pushed it open slowly, wincing at the loud creak of rusty hinges, the sound cutting through the silence like a scream. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the gloom, illuminating piles of boxes and old furniture draped in dusty sheets, their shapes looming like silent sentinels. "Hello," I called, my voice small, swallowed by the cavernous space. "Is anyone up here?" No response, just a faint groan of the floorboards under my weight, the air thick with dust and the musty smell of neglect. I took a cautious step forward, my pulse roaring in my ears, the wrench raised like a talisman against the unknown. As I moved deeper into the attic, my light fell on something that made my blood run cold. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a makeshift living space, a dirty mattress on the floor, surrounded by empty food wrappers and water bottles, their labels faded but recognizable, some bearing the same brand as the cookies that had gone missing, and pinned to the wall above it, a collection of photos, their edges curling, their surfaces glinting in the flashlight's beam. With shaking hands, I moved closer, my breath shallow, dread coiling in my gut. There we were, my family, captured in moments we had known were being watched. Photos of us unpacking boxes on our first day, May's laughter frozen in time. May and I sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, our hands entwined. The kids playing in the backyard, Lily's pigtails bouncing as she chased Tommy through the grass. All candid shots, taken without our knowledge, the angle suggesting a lens hidden in the shadows of our own home. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat, the violation so profound it felt like a physical wound. A noise behind me, a faint scuff like a foot against wood, made me whirl around, the wrench raised offensively, my flashlight beam darting wildly. But there was nothing, just shadows and silence. The attic's emptiness a taunt. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and anger, the words echoing off the rafters. "I know you're here." Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut with deafening bang, the sound reverberating through the space. I ran toward it, my heart in my throat, but before I could reach it, all the lights in the house flickered on at once, a harsh glare that stung my eyes. From downstairs, I heard May scream, her voice raw with terror. "Way!" The children. Panic gripped me, a visceral force that propelled me down the attic stairs, my footsteps pounding against the wood, the wrench still clutched in my hand. I burst into the kids' room, the door slamming against the wall, to find May already there, clutching Tommy to her chest, his small body trembling, his eyes wide with fear. Lily's bed was empty, the covers thrown back, her stuffed bunny lying abandoned on the pillow. "She's gone," May sobbed, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. I heard her talking to someone, and when I came in, a high-pitched giggle cut through her words, eerie and out of place, followed by the unmistakable sound of the back door slamming shut. Without thinking, I ran downstairs, May close behind, Tommy still in her arms, his whimpers a counterpoint to the pounding of our feet. We burst out into the night, the cool air sharp against my skin, the full moon casting an eerie glow of a farmyard, long shadows stretching across the overgrown fields like grasping fingers. "Lily!" I shouted, my voice raw, desperate. "Lily, where are you?" Another giggle. This time from the direction of the old barn, its weathered silhouette looming against the moonlit sky. I sprinted toward it, my bare feet slipping on the dew-slick grass, my breath coming in ragged gasps. May followed, her sobs muffled as she held Tommy close, her strength a quiet force beside my panic. As I reached the barn door, I heard Lily's voice from inside, small and trusting, "Daddy, come meet my friend." I yanked the door open, the hinges groaning, my body braced for anything, ready to fight, to protect, to do whatever it took to bring my daughter back. But what I saw stopped me in my tracks, my breath catching my throat. Lily stood in the center of the barn, her small hand clasped in that of a man I'd never seen before. He was tall and gaunt, his frame skeletal under tattered clothes, his wild eyes gleaming with manic intensity, his scraggly beard framing a grin that revealed a mouthful of rotting teeth. "Well, hello there, neighbor," he said, his voice raspy, cold, a sound that slithered across my skin. "Lovely night for a family reunion, isn't it?" I took a step forward, my eyes locked on Lily, my voice trembling but firm. "Sweetheart, come here. Come to Daddy." Lily looked confused, her brow furrowing as she glanced between me and the man. "But Daddy, this is my friend," she said, her voice small, uncertain. "The one from the attic. He says he used to live here and that it's his house. He wants us to leave." The man's grin widened, a predator smile that made my blood boil. "Smart girl you've got there," he said, his tone mocking, his grip tightening slightly on Lily's hand. "Yes, this is my home. Has been for generations. And I don't take kindly to trespassers." I heard May gasp behind me as she entered the barn, Tommy clinging to her, his face buried in her shoulder. The man's eyes flickered to her, then back to me, a glint of amusement in their depths. "Now," he said, his tone conversational but laced with menace, "we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You pack up and leave tonight, and we'll forget this whole unpleasant business. Or," he pulled Lily closer, his fingers digging into her arm, and my vision tunnel, rage and fear coalescing into a single burning point. "Well, let's just say you won't like the alternative." For a moment, I was paralyzed, fear rooting me to the spot, my mind racing with images of what this man could do, had already done. Then something inside me snapped, a primal instinct that drowned out the fear, fueled by the need to protect my family. This was my home, my daughter, and I'd be damned if I let this madman take them from me. With a roar of rage, I charged at him, the wrench raised, my body moving before my mind could catch up. He shoved Lily aside, her small body stumbling as she fell to the straw-covered floor, and met me halfway, his fist connected with my jaw in a burst of pain that sent stars exploding across my vision. We went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the dirty barn floor, the stench of mold and decay filling my lungs. I could hear May shouting, the children crying, their voices a distant echo as I focused on the man beneath me. I rained down blows, my fists fueled by fear and adrenaline, each strike a desperate plea to keep my family safe. He fought back viciously, his nails clawing at my face, his fingers seeking my eyes, his strength surprising for his gaunt frame. In the distance, I heard sirens, their wail cutting through the night, growing louder, a lifeline I hadn't dared hope for. Our closest neighbors, a mile down the road, must have heard the commotion and called the police. The man heard it too, his struggles growing more desperate, his eyes wild with panic. With a burst of strength, he threw me off, scrambling to his feet, his breath ragged. He made a move toward Lily, his hand outstretched, but May was there, her face a mass of fury, as she swung a piece of lumber she'd found among the barn's debris. It connected with his head with a sickening crack, and he went down hard, his body crumpling to the floor, unconscious. Moments later, the barn was filled with police officers, their flashlights cutting to the dark, their voices sharp and authoritative as they handcuffed the intruder, his limp form unresisting. I gathered my family close, Lily's small body trembling as she clung to me, May's arms around us both, Tommy's sobs muffled against her shoulder. We stood there, shaking, crying, the weight of the night pressing down on us, but alive, together. Later, we learned the full story. The man was Jeffrey Larson, whose family had owned the farm for generations before losing it to bankruptcy years ago. He'd been squatting in the house ever since, hiding in the attic, living like a ghost in the shadows, his presence undetected by the sporadic tenants who'd come and gone. When we moved in, something in his fragile, unhinged mind had snapped, our presence a threat to the warped reality he'd constructed. The photos, the missing items, the noises. They were all part of his attempt to reclaim what he believed was his. A campaign of terror that had escalated to the confrontation in the barn. In the days that followed, we debated whether to stay or go. The decision a heavy weight on our hearts. The children were traumatized, Lily's bright laughter replaced by quiet unease, Tommy clinging to us at every turn. May was jumpy, her eyes darting to the corners of rooms, her sleep broken by nightmares. But in the end, we decided to reclaim our home, to fight for the life we dreamed of. We installed a state-of-the-art security system, its cameras and alarms a new layer of protection. We attended therapy as a family, the sessions a safe space to process the fear, to rebuild what had been shaken. Slowly, life began to return to normal, the farmhouse filling once more with the sounds of laughter and love. Sometimes at night, I still wake with a start, my heart racing as I check on the kids, their sleeping forms a reassurance that grounds me. I move through the house, ensuring every door and window is locked, the bolt's a ritual that steadies my nerves. And sometimes in the quiet, I could swear I hear footsteps in the attic, a faint echo that sends a shiver down my spine. But then May will stir beside me, her warmth a reminder what's real, or I'll hear Lily talking in her sleep, her voice a soft murmur of dreams, and I'm pulled back to the present. This farm was supposed to be our fresh start, a place to build a future free from the constraints of the past. Despite everything, the fear, the violence, the intrusion, it had become exactly that, though not in the way we expected. We faced our fears together, stood against the darkness that threatened to consume us, and came out stronger, our bond forged in the crucible of that night. As I write this, sitting on our porch, the sun setting over fields in a blaze of gold and crimson, I realize that home isn't just a place. It's the people you love, the strength you find together in the face of adversity, the courage to stand firm when the world tries to break you. That's something no intruder, real or imagined, can ever take away. And as the stars begin to emerge, their light steady in the darkening sky, I know we'll keep fighting for this home, for each other, one day at a time.